Chapter 50. Su Dong used his soft voice to ridicule. Patriarch Shin really has a good idea. You clearly know that our Zodiac Guardian warriors are lacking, yet you propose such a competition. In my opinion, why don't you just rush up together? A group fight is fine. Zhou Tianlu said. Zodiac Tiger, please pay attention to your words. The 4 great families are not to be insulted. 10 matches to determine the winner is our bottom line. That's right, the members of the 4 great families who are here today are the elites of their families. However, since ancient times, the Zodiac warriors have always respected strength. If you can't surpass the 4 great families in all aspects, how can we be convinced? Hai Ryue said coldly. 10 matches is fine, but my side requests to repeat. She was confident that none of the 4 patriarchs in front of her was her opponent. As long as she could repeat, it wouldn't be difficult to win a few of the 10 matches. Moreover, she wasn't the only powerful Zodiac Guardian warrior. Shunjua smiled and said, I just said we need to thoroughly rectify the abilities of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. How can we verify it by repeating? At the same time, we request that as the King of the Zodiac, we hope that Kirin must appear. After all, we hope that in the future, the commander of our Eastern Guardian warriors will be a true powerhouse. Hai Ryue's footsteps paused. The ground trembled violently, and her aura clearly became stronger. Your 4 great families are not here to exchange pointers. Since that's the case, we have nothing to talk about. Su Zhuan sneered. What? Don't tell me your Zodiac Guardian warriors are going to run away without a fight? Chiyu took a step to the side, blocking in front of Hai Ryue. Fine, it's just 10 matches, we agree. Chiyu, are you crazy? Su Dong anxiously pulled Chiyu. Chiyu smiled. Su Dong saw the lewd look on his face. Perverted tiger, since you call me boss, I am the king of the Zodiac. I am also the king of the Zodiac, so let me make the decision today. We may not lose to them. I also want to see just how powerful the 4 great families are to insist on taking over the position of our life guardian warriors. Su Dong looked at Hai Ryue. Hai Ryue was similarly infuriated by Su Zhuan's words, but she was able to remain clear-headed. There were only 8 Zodiac Guardian warriors, including Chiyu, and only 5 of them had the ability to fight. Yan Xiaoi, Vol, and Chiyu didn't have the ability to fight at all. Even if the 5 of them won, it would only be a draw. She opened her mouth and said, 10 matches are fine, but we want 1 Zodiac warrior to have a chance to repeat his performance. You can also choose 1 person to have that power. In other words, each side had 1 person who could participate in 2 matches. The 4 patriarchs looked at each other and nodded. Zhou Tianlu said, Okay, then we will also take a step back and do as the dragon warrior said. Looking at the confident smiles on the faces of the 4 patriarchs, Hai Ryue and Su Dong secretly felt that something was wrong. The 4 great families wouldn't do anything they weren't sure of. Seeing that they were so confident, it seemed that today's competition wouldn't be as easy as they had imagined. Chiyu suddenly said, I still have 1 more request. If we win, I hope you can do what I said just now. He was referring to the 4 great families kneeling towards the east and offering sacrifices to the innocent descendants of Yen and Huang from hundreds of years ago. Shunjua's smile looked a bit gloomy. Of course, if you win, you will be the leader of the East Guardian warriors. We 4 great families are willing to listen to you. Chiyu laughed and said, Okay, then let's start. Brothers and sisters, come out and meet the guests. Purple, blue, red, and green lights flashed in front of Chiyu's chest. Silhouettes appeared out of thin air around Chiyu. The 4 patriarchs took a step back at the same time and retracted their energy auras as they carefully observed the Zodiac Guardian God warriors that had suddenly appeared. Although the 4 great families had guessed that the Zodiac warriors weren't just Chiyu, Dragon, and Tiger, they didn't expect that there would be so many Zodiac warriors. Counting carefully, there were a total of 8 people. Their special way of appearing caused a great shock to the 4 great families. In fact, according to Hai Ryue's plan, she wanted everyone to fly together. Hai Ryue and Su Dong could both fly, and Ming Ming could also glide. As long as it was used well, it wouldn't be difficult to bring the others. But Chi Yu was very afraid of heights and refused to agree to fly in the sky. After discussing, it was decided that Hai Ryue and Su Dong would fly in the sky to shock the four great families. As for Chi Yu, he put the others into his Kirin Pearl and used Kirin to hide his body. Without anyone knowing, he quietly went up to Guijian's worry. At this time, it really had a great shock. The elites of the four great families slowly gathered behind the four patriarchs, forming two distinct factions with the 8 Zodiac warriors. Hai Ryue slowly walked out of the Zodiac warriors and said indifferently, "The first round, who from the four great families will give me advice?" There was naturally a reason why she was the first one to come out. She was the strongest among all the Zodiac warriors, and the first round would affect the momentum of the entire competition. Therefore, Hai Ryue was determined to win. After the four patriarchs of the four great families discussed in a low voice, Zhou Tianlu slowly walked forward. He was wearing a moon-white robe that gave off a retro vibe. With one hand behind his back, his body seemed to be weightless. With just half a step, he was already 3 meters away from Hai Ruqi. His silver-white hair made him look like he was out of this world. He extended his right hand to Hai Ryue and said, "This old man is Zhou Tianlu from the Zhou family. I would like to experience the skills of the Zodiac Dragon warriors." The true meaning of the exchange was to show off one's strength. From the moment Chi Yu appeared, he had pointed out this point. There was no longer anything to talk about in the exchange. They could only use their strength to overwhelm the other party. Therefore, a battle was inevitable. Whether it was the other Zodiac warriors or the members of the four great families, they all subconsciously retreated, leaving enough space for Hai Ryue and Zhou Tianlu at the peak of Tianxiang Mountain. Hai Ryue's eyes flashed and she shouted, "Be careful." At the same time, she retracted the wings on her back. Her body left a faint afterimage in the air. The distance of 3 meters was too short for her. She only needed to stretch out her hand. And those sharp dragon claws were already in front of Zhou Tianlu's throat. The rising dragon art's dragon qi emitted a strong penetrating power. Zhou Tianlu did not panic at all. His left hand was still behind his back, but his right hand was instantly raised and stopped in front of his throat. He actually used his palm to block Hai Ryue's dragon claws. Clang! A clear sound came from the point of contact between the two. Zhou Tianlu's body trembled slightly. His upper body swayed, while Hai Ryue's body made a graceful somersault in the air. Her claws once again stretched out, transforming into countless claw shadows that covered every part of Zhou Tianlu's body. Zhou Tianlu's left hand finally stretched out. His hands seemed to be dancing slowly in front of him. Clang, 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 clang. No matter how fast Hai Ryue's attack was, every attack was successfully blocked by Zhou Tianlu's palms. Su Dong, who was beside Chi Yu, could not help but praise, "What a good move." Chi Yu said in a low voice, "Is Ryue's dragon claws blunt? How come they can't even break through the opponent's palms?" Su Dong smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, lower your voice. The Guangdong Zhou clan's ability attribute is Western Gengxin metal. It has a sharp side and is absolutely hard at the same time. Attack, defense, and speed are the Zhou clan's best. Their weakness is that they are not as flexible and diverse as the other 3 great clans. The Zhou clan's strongest ability is their metallization. All metals have no effect in front of them. Zhou Tianlu's body is the best weapon and the best shield. With his age and status in the Zhou clan, his metallization ability must have reached the pinnacle." Chi Yu said in surprise, "That means even bullets are harmless to him." Su Dong nodded and said, "Indeed. Unless it's a powerful heavy weapon, the Zhou clan's metallization ability can deal with it. The Zhou clan also has some special abilities. I don't know how many this Zhou Tianlu has. Boss, you don't need to worry. Ryue is not easy to deal with. Even the hardest metal will not have any good results in front of her. As the two of them were speaking, a loud clanging sound rang out. Hai Ryue's claws and Zhou Tianlu's palms collided head-on. Both of their bodies were pushed back by the recoil. Although Zhou Tianlu had the ability to turn into metal, Hai Ryue used her claws after all. The attack power of her claws was concentrated at the tip of her claws, so she had a big advantage in terms of penetrative attack power. Zhou Tianlu's breathing has become a little rushed, and a layer of metallic luster appeared on his skin. As his aura gradually became stronger, the white light around his body also became stronger. It was a white different from Hai Ryue's. Zhou Tianlu's body emitted a strong white light, while Ryue's body emitted a white cloud-like dragon chi. Both were white, but when they came into contact, there was a strong repulsion. Zhou Tianlu clenched his fists and growled. His white robe fluttered without any wind and his arms shook. Hundreds of large and small stones floated up from the ground and quickly formed a layer of meteorites around his body. As the white light around Zhou Tianlu's body enveloped him, a layer of metallic luster appeared on these small stones. On the other side of Qiyu, Ming Ming whispered, "Mind control, metal solidification. These are all powerful metal-type auxiliary abilities." Not knowing why, Qiyu suddenly felt a little excited. Ever since he became a member of the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors, he had never fully seen the abilities of his companions. Today was obviously a good opportunity. With Hai Ryue's arrogance, her strength is at least not worse than the Zhou family's patriarch. As Hai Ryue was pushed back, she also stopped. Zhou Tianlu's movements were very fast. In the time he raised his hands, his body was already covered with large and small stones that had been metallized. The big ones were about the size of a basketball, and the small ones were about the size of a tennis ball. They looked densely packed, and through the reflection of the metallic luster from his body, it was full of a strange feeling. The wings that were originally kept behind her back slowly spread out. With one foot slightly touching the ground, she floated up from the ground. Qiyu noticed that the milky white pearl on her chest had already lit up. It was no longer a cloudy light, but had become abnormally bright. Lude Tiger Su Dong said with some excitement, "Look, Ryue is about to use her ultimate skill, Dragon Leap 18 strikes. I wonder how many strikes this Zhou Tianlu can block." Dragon Leap 18 strikes is not a martial art, but a special attack method that combines abilities and Ryue's own dragon power. The first time I met Ryue, I was defeated by her after 3 strikes. Even now, I think it will be difficult for me to withstand 6 strikes. I wonder how many strikes Ryue has practiced. This is a special ability of dragons. Because Ryue has an extra pair of wings compared to the previous Zodiac Dragon Warriors, her turning and pouncing in the air is more flexible, and her attack power is extremely tyrannical. Just as Su Dong was speaking, Ryue's delicate body had already risen 30 meters into the air. Zhou Tianlu's eyes revealed a trace of cunning. With a wave of his hands, the countless metal stones that were originally surrounding his body covered the sky as they flew towards Ryue. The stones brought with them an ear-piercing whistling sound. It was clear that they had a very strong impact. Hai Ryue didn't dodge, nor did she fly higher to slow down the stones. When her body had just risen 30 meters into the air, her body suddenly turned around. The wings on her back closed up again, and her dragon claws faced each other in front of her chest. She seemed to be saying something, and a white ball of light quietly appeared between her claws. The wings on her back opened up again, and the ball of light in Ryue's hand had already floated up, turning into countless tiny light dots that merged into her wings. In the next moment, her dragon claws crossed in front of her full chest, and the wings on her back began to flap. In just a moment, countless tiny light dots had already shot out from the dragon wings. There was no whistling sound, but wherever the light dots passed, the air became distorted and blurry. The white dragon wings brought with them spots of starlight, looking very beautiful. Su Dong said in a low voice. First strike, dragon wings chasing the stars. The white light dots almost flashed and completely disappeared in the air, as if they didn't have any effect. However, Zhou Tianlu's expression changed greatly. The metal stones that were originally chasing Hai Ryue's body suddenly stopped, and were no longer under his control. In the next moment, the extremely hard metal stones in the air suddenly exploded with a low sound, and one after another, they exploded into dust. Some white light dots drilled out from the smaller metal stones, and flew out in an instant, directly shooting towards Zhou Tianlu below. Although the tiny light dots were much weaker than when they were first released from the wings, Zhou Tianlu's expression became abnormally serious. With a deep shout, his right foot took a step to the right, and the white light around his body suddenly turned golden. A faint layer of golden light surrounded and twisted around his body, and the remaining light dots of the dragon wings chasing the stars immediately disappeared as soon as they entered this layer of twisted golden light, like rivers flowing into the sea, not leaving a single trace. The twisted golden light did not disappear, and at the same time the light dots disappeared, Zhou Tianlu's body suddenly swelled up a lot. No, it was not that his body had expanded, but that a layer of armor had appeared around his body. The armor, which was flickering with golden light, looked abnormally thick. It covered every part of his body, and only his eyes were exposed. The cold light in his eyes intensified, and he raised his head to look at Hai Ryue in the sky. All of this happened very quickly, and when the light dots disappeared, the metal armor had already appeared. Su Dong sighed in admiration. As expected of the Zhou family's patriarch, this is another ability, metal armor transformation, defense increased by 3 times. Qi Yu said unhappily, "You don't seem to be worried for Ryue at all." Su Dong said in a low voice, "If you had seen her, this Tyrannosaurus Rex, at full power, I'm afraid you wouldn't be worried for her." In the air, Hai Ryue was not at all surprised by the layer of thick armor on her opponent's body. After flapping her wings, her body rose another 10 meters in the air, and then, immediately after, accompanied by a deafening dragon roar, Hai Ryue's body was like a meteor, carrying intense white light, directly rushing towards Zhou Tianlu below. Accompanied by a deafening dragon roar, Hai Ryue's body was like a meteor, carrying intense white light, directly rushing towards Zhou Tianlu below. Her lightning-fast attack was actually constantly changing her figure in the air, causing the meteor that she had transformed into to become larger and cover a wider area. One could clearly see that wherever the white light passed, the air was distorted in a spiral shape. Dragon Leap 18 strikes, second strike, Makino Meteor. Su Dong's eyes lit up. Zhou Tianlu's body also became illusory, his feet using a set of strange footwork, and the armor on his body did not affect his speed in the slightest. When Hai Ryue's body pounced not far above his head. Because of the speed, Zhou Tianlu's body had already become more than 10, and it was impossible to tell which one was real and which was fake. The dazzling golden and white light was the center of the collision between the two, and a surging airflow burst out, carrying countless metal fragments in the air. The airflow scattered in all directions. Su Dong stepped forward timidly in front of Qi Yu, and with a low roar, a circle of white air burst out from his body, completely blocking the incoming metal fragments. The same thing happened on the side of the 4 major clans. Those who could come here were the elites of the 4 great families, even though the metal fragments had a strong impact. Although the impact of the metal fragments was very strong, they still did not hurt a single person. The only thing that could be heard was a continuous burst of dense puffing sounds on the ground. The white figure leaped up again, and to the 4 major clans' horror, the dragon roar was heard again. In the previous attack, Hai Ryue and Zhou Tianlu had exchanged hundreds of attacks in an instant. Although she was pushed back by Zhou Tianlu, the strength of Zhou Tianlu's defense was still slightly weaker than Hai Ryue's attack power, and the metal armor on his body had a certain degree of damage. From Qi Yu's point of view, at this time, Hai Ryue was like a sharp longsword, while Zhou Tianlu below was like a lump of metal. To put it bluntly, he was like a turtle with a thick shell. Although the sword was sharp, there seemed to be no place to attack. The white dragon wings gently flapped in the air, and every time they flapped, a layer of white fog would be released into the surroundings. The clouds in the sky began to fluctuate violently, and the clouds that were originally high up in the sky began to rapidly cover the ground. This was an incomprehensible natural phenomenon. When the thick white fog came into contact with the white airflow emitted by Hai Ryue, the fog seemed to have a mind of its own and spread out in all directions, covering the sky and surrounding Zhou Tianlu's body. Long Yu, Ryue is going to use one strike to decide victory. Su Dong raised his head to look at the fog in the sky, and the eyes behind the glowing mask suddenly became sharp. What is Long Yu? Chi Yu asked in confusion. Su Dong said in a low voice, Dragon Realm is an ability that Ryue must use before using her strongest move. It's also one of the most powerful abilities of a dragon. In Dragon Realm, a dragon's strength will increase greatly, and under the pressure of dragon might in Dragon Realm, the strength of other creatures will be greatly reduced. Only Ryue knows the true mysteries of Long Yu. Hai Ryue's body was completely covered by the fog, but for some reason, under the guidance of Kirin's aura, Chi Yu was surprised to find that he could actually see the crystal white armor on Hai Ryue's body. Zhou clan leader, you must be careful. Hai Ryue's voice came from the sky and spread out in all directions. Zhou Tianlu, who was below, had already reacted when Long Yu appeared in the sky. 9 black lights shot out from the Zhou clan disciples, and in a flash, they appeared around Zhou Tianlu's body, and began to rotate according to the positions of the 9 palaces. A faint halo spread out along with the appearance of the 9 black lights. Chi Yu looked carefully, and found that there were 9 long swords. When the 9 long swords were under Zhou Tianlu's control, the tip of each sword had a half-foot-long sword light that was constantly swallowing. Hai Ryue's surprised voice came from the sky again. I didn't expect Zhou clan leader to have the advanced ability of controlling objects, the Imperial Sword technique. But clan leader, you must still be careful. Your Imperial Sword technique may not be able to stop me. Zhou Tianlu laughed and was still full of energy. All right, I will use the Imperial Sword technique to compete with the Dragon Warriors Long Yu. The 4 big families had a deep understanding of the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors, so they were very clear about the abilities of dragons. Although Hai Ryue had an extra pair of dragon wings compared to the previous Dragon Warriors, it seemed to be more powerful. It might look stronger, but the basic abilities of a dragon wouldn't change. The reason why he used his own Imperial Sword technique was premeditated. The most important point of the Imperial Sword technique was to lock onto the opponent. As long as he could lock onto the opponent, the confusing effect of the Dragon Realm would naturally disappear. Once he found Hai Ryue's position, it would be much easier to deal with him. The 9 long swords slightly circled in the air, and Zhou Tianlu took the initiative to attack. With an ear-piercing whistle, 9 intense golden lights shot straight into the sky. After the 9 long swords entered the Dragon Realm, they immediately caused the fog to fluctuate violently. However, Zhou Tianlu had still underestimated Hai Ryue's ability. Dragon Realm was a dragon's domain. How could it be so easy to break through? When the 9 long swords entered the Dragon Realm with a half-foot sword light, Zhou Tianlu was surprised to find that his swords seemed to be wrapped in a sticky liquid, and their speed in the Dragon Realm was greatly reduced. And just at this time, the clouds in the sky moved. One after another, 6 auspicious clouds floated out from the large expanse of clouds and mist. From the thick mist that was close to a substance, it could be seen that these 6 balls of white mist were the essence of the entire Dragon Realm. The 6 balls of cloud and mist floated in a strange trajectory, but did not fall. Instead, they hovered in the air. Chi Yu asked Su Dong, "What ability is this?" Su Dong frowned helplessly and said, "This is the first time I've seen this ability. In the past, Ryue had never used it before. It should be because she had just comprehended it or because she had never needed to use it. Just as the two of them finished speaking, the white mist in the air had already changed. 6 balls of white mist condensed in the air, and the mist that was originally from the dragon realm quietly dispersed, as if the dragon realm had also disappeared. However, the following change caused everyone below to be filled with surprise and shock. The 6 balls of white mist merged into one. A surging dragon's roar pierced through the air. As the white mist fluctuated violently, its form also changed. A faint dragon-shaped light and shadow appeared behind the clouds. Chi was shocked to discover that the dragon-shaped light and shadow was exactly the same as the white dragon sculpture in the villa of the dragon realm. Something even more surprising happened. The dragon-shaped light and shadow floated and merged with the clouds. Then, accompanied by an even louder dragon roar, the clouds in the air disappeared, and a huge white dragon appeared out of thin air. The white dragon's body was dozens of meters long, and it looked so real. The red dragon eyes were like 2 huge rubies, shining brightly in the air, and full of domineering light. There were 2 horns on its head, and its whole body was covered with dense white scales. For huge dragon claws were constantly waving under its abdomen, and the claws were surrounded by mist. It was the image of a dragon soaring in the clouds. A dragon, it turned out to be a real dragon. The members of the 4 families were so shocked that they could not look away. Although they also knew that the Zodiac Guardian, as the former head of the Eastern Guardians, was very powerful, they did not expect it to be so powerful. That was already an indescribable feeling. A dragon. The dragon was one of the totems that had always been respected in the Yanhuang Republic. Seeing the appearance of the dragon, the 4 families were completely suppressed and at an absolute disadvantage. Among them, the one who was the most shocked should be Zhou Tianlu. His metal-like skin actually had some slight tremors. Almost all of Hai Ryue's dragon power was exerted on him, so he felt it the most. He lost contact with the 9 long swords at the same time when the huge dragon appeared. Those were the treasures that he had carefully prepared for many years. In the face of the huge pressure of the white dragon in the air, he actually could not summon the will to fight against it. The white dragon opened its mouth slightly, and a mouthful of white flame spewed out from its mouth. The target of the white flame was not Zhou Tianlu below, but the huge stone tablet of Gue Jianqiu. The dark gray stone tablet only took a moment to turn dark red under the white flame. Under the somewhat fearful gaze of the crowd, the huge rock actually gradually shrank, but the appearance of the stone tablet did not suffer any damage. Hai Ryue's voice came from the dragon's mouth. "We are all guardians of the East. I do not wish to be ruthless to each other. Patriarch Zhou, do we still need to compete?" At this moment, under the effect of the white flame, the huge stone tablet had already shrunk to 2/3 of its original size, but there was not a single crack on the stone tablet. Even the 3 big words of Gue Jianqiu were still as clear as before. Zhou Tianlu took a step back, and the metallized armor on his body gradually disappeared, revealing the white robe underneath. He sighed and said, "I was prepared to use the 9-ion Mother Sword to fight against the dragon's territory, but I did not expect that I would lose before I could even use the power of the sword. Moreover, I lost so miserably. But I also have to admit that I am indeed not your match." As he said that, he took a few steps back, and his hands hung down, indicating that he had already admitted defeat. Destroying a stone tablet was easy, and Zhou Tianlu believed that he could do it, but refining a stone tablet without any damage was definitely not something he could do. He was very clear that the dragon's flames that Hai Ryue had transformed into had removed some of the impurities in the huge rock, and then compressed it from the molecular level, which was why the stone tablet had turned into its current state. Such a powerful dragon, such ingenious control, he had no other choice but to admit defeat. In fact, Hai Ryue, who was in the air, was secretly relieved at this moment. The ability she was using now was the 10th strike of the Dragon Leap 18 technique, the Dragon God's true body. After she entered the sixth cloud realm, she had recently comprehended it with the help of Kiran's aura. Even she herself was not confident that she could use it perfectly. The reason why she chose to use it was because she wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. Zhou Tianlu's ability was much stronger than she had imagined, especially after he used the 9 imperial swords. Hai Ryue understood that she would have to put in a lot of effort to win. And in today's 10 battles, she had to fight twice. Dragon power was limited, and the only way to better deal with the next battle was to conserve as much dragon power as possible and end the current battle as quickly as possible. Only God knew if there were any more powerful people in the 4 great families. However, Hai Ryue miscalculated. When she condensed her dragon power to use the dragon god's true body, she was shocked to find that the Dragon Leap 18 strikes consumed so much thundercloud force. It was comparable to the previous 9 strikes thundercloud force. As soon as she used the dragon god's true body, she regretted it immediately. However, the thundercloud force had already been used, and could not be withdrawn. She could only try her best to calm herself down and use the full power of the strike. Chapter 51. There was no doubt about the deterrent power of the dragon god's real form. That dragon flame was actually Hai Ryue's last thundercloud force. It was not that she did not want to attack Zhou Tianlu directly. She was confident that she could kill Zhou Tianlu, but in this situation, the Zodiac warriors did not want to be enemies with the 4 major families. They were all guardians of the East, so how could they have such a deep grudge? In fact, if Zhou Tianlu did not admit defeat, he only needed to wait for a few more minutes, and Hai Ryue would not be able to maintain the dragon god's real form anymore. Unfortunately, in this situation, anyone else would have admitted defeat. After all, the strength that Hai Ryue showed was too terrifying. The dragon disappeared, and Hai Ryue, whose body was covered with dragon scales, floated down. Seeing her figure, Qi Yu and Su Dong's expressions changed at the same time. The 4 major families might not be able to feel the change in Hai Ryue, but as the Zodiac Guardian warriors, they could clearly feel the change. Hai Ryue, who was originally Lu Yun's second evolution, had now transformed into her first evolution form. The dragon scales on her body had clearly become sparser, and her eyes had turned from red to blue. The dragon aura on her body was still dense, but both of them could faintly feel that her strength had weakened a lot. Zhou Tianlu clearly did not notice this situation. He leaned forward slightly and said, "Thank you, Dragon Warrior, for showing mercy. You are indeed the strongest among the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. I have lost this match." As the head of the Zhou family, he was also the oldest among the 4 major family heads. Zhou Tianlu was very gentlemanly. Hai Ryue just nodded at him and walked towards the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Qi Yu and Su Dong looked at each other. Su Dong nodded at him, and then gave Hai Ryue a look before walking out. Hai Ryue walked to Qi Yu's side and stopped. She took a deep breath and forced herself to circulate the little dragon power left in her body. She tried her best not to expose herself, at least to maintain the first stage of her dragon transformation. At this moment, her heart was filled with regret. He had won the first round, but he had exhausted too much of his strength. Judging from the current situation, it was impossible for him to attack a second time today. Moreover, the strength of the 4 patriarchs was clearly much stronger than he had imagined. The overall situation was not optimistic. Just as Hai Ryue's mood was complicated and depressed, a warm big hand suddenly grabbed her dragon claw. Hai Ryue was startled, and just as she was about to subconsciously attack, she saw a pair of bright eyes. It was Qi Yu's gaze. "Leave the rest to us. Have a good rest." Qi Yu's voice was very low and contained Kiran's aura. Only Hai Ryue could hear it. Although his voice was very low and soft, Hai Ryue could hear the determination in it. A warm energy came from Qi Yu's hand. The energy was not very strong, but it was very gentle. When the warm Kiran's thundercloud force merged with Hai Ryue's own dragon power, there was a sudden change in quality. Hai Ryue only felt that her whole body was relaxed. The discomfort caused by the overdraft of thundercloud force when she used the dragon god true body was immediately greatly reduced. Chi Yu's thundercloud force did not feel strong to her, but it was like a continuous stream of water. She looked at Chi Yu in surprise. Chi Yu was also looking at her. Hai Ryue whispered, "When did your thundercloud force become so strong?" Chi Yu smiled and said, "Is it very strong? Compared to you, it's still a lot weaker. I am the king of the Zodiac. It doesn't matter if I used to be a hooligan or a ruffian. Now I have the responsibility to do something for the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. Look, the battle of the perverted tiger is about to begin." As soon as Su Dong walked out, the head of the Su family, Su Ziyuan, came up to him without hesitation. The four major families had just lost a battle. This made the hot-tempered head of the Su family very dissatisfied. His body was surrounded by flames as he arrogantly said to Su Dong, "Let me fight with the king of the land, the Zodiac Tiger Warrior." Su Dong's movements paused for a moment, and the aura around his body changed slightly. "All right, please advise me." Chi Yu was surprised to find that Su Dong's voice had changed. It was no longer soft, but very deep, as if he was deliberately suppressing his voice. His heart moved. He suddenly remembered that Hai Ryue had told him that Su Dong was from Jiangsu. Moreover, he came from a famous family with the surname Su. He couldn't be related to the head of the Su family, could he? Hai Ryue seemed to have seen through Chi Yu's doubts and said in a low voice, "The head of the Su family is Su Dong's grandfather. Ever since Su Dong became a Zodiac warrior, he began to hide his strength in the family. In the past, Master Zagru had a sincere talk with him. He hoped that Su Dong would not reveal that he was a Zodiac warrior in the family. Although Su Dong is a bit lascivious, he is very reasonable. Don't worry, he can handle it." Chi Yu looked at the grandfather and grandson in the middle of Gui Jian Chou and couldn't help but be speechless. He also wanted to see how Su Dong would handle this competition. Among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, Su Dong's strength could be said to be only inferior to Hai Ryue. How would he face his grandfather? While thinking, Chi Yu suddenly felt his hand go cold. The dragon claw that he was holding on to Hai Ryue had unknowingly changed back to the shape of a hand. For the first time, he discovered that Hai Ryue's fingers were actually so slender. That hand that was full of strength was actually abnormally soft. Holding it in his hand was indescribably comfortable. Hai Ryue acted as if nothing had happened. Her gaze fell on the battlefield, but the hand that she held on to Chi Yu gave Chi Yu a strong and strange feeling. Feeling a pain in his waist, Chi Yu almost cried out. He didn't know when Ming Ming had already come to his other side. She glared at him fiercely. Her lips moved slightly, and a faintly discernible voice passed into his ears. "What have you been doing during the time I was away? You and Sister Ryue." Chi Yu cried out in his heart that he was wronged. But he had never practiced the secret sound transmission technique. At this moment, Hai Ryue was by his side. He really didn't know how to answer Ming Ming. He could only give her a helpless look. It turned out that being noticed by a beauty was not always a happy thing. Right now, he was a bit restless. Whether it was with Hai Ryue or with Ming Ming, there was a bit of warmth, but it was all unreal. From a psychological point of view, Chi Yu was naturally more inclined towards Ming Ming, who had always been good to him. But for some reason, in recent days, he had a strong feeling that under Hai Ryue's cold exterior hid a lonely heart. Just when she held his hand, he could clearly feel the helplessness and loneliness in her. No matter how strong a woman was, she would still have her weak side. While thinking, Chi Yu pulled Ming Ming back, letting her stand on the other side of his body. The Kirin thundercloud force in his body continued to flow into Hai Ryue's body. The battle had already begun. Su Ziyuan had an impatient temper. His attacks were also as fiery as his temper. There were no gorgeous tricks. His arms shook slightly, and each of his 10 fingers shot out a flame towards Su Dong. Su Dong's movements were not fast. His body was covered in a thick layer of long white fur, with some black fur in between, forming a black pattern. The tiger wings on his back spread open, and the lines of his muscles were extremely elegant. Although it was not armor, the black and white fur was not simple. Seeing the 10 flames already attacking his body from different directions, Su Dong's right leg pulled back slightly, and he let out a low tiger roar. His hands suddenly expanded to 3 times their original size, and he struck forward like lightning. 2 balls of white light flashed around his body like millstones, dissolving all 10 flames. Su Ziyuan gave a low roar. His eyes seemed to be spitting fire. After releasing the 10 flames, he immediately sat in a posture of holding up the sky with his hands. The red light around his body took on the shape of a flame, and he stood on the peak of Guijian Chou Mountain like a small sun. That dazzling light made it impossible to look at. Hai Ryue said with some shock, "Could it be that he wants to finish the battle quickly? What a strong energy!" Chi Yu was also shocked. One of his 4 types of thundercloud force was the fire thundercloud force, and the power that this Su family head was using was condensed from the purest fire element energy. With such a strong energy, it was not any weaker than Zhou Tianlu's. It was no wonder that he had been releasing the energy from his body so arrogantly. By the time Su Dong had neutralized Su Ziyuan's first wave of attacks, Su Ziyuan had already made a jaw-dropping move. His body was like a cross as he stretched his arms horizontally to both sides. Under the support of the surging flame energy, his body actually floated up into the air. In a battle between experts, if one were to slowly float up into the air like this, regardless of how difficult it was to rely on one's physical body to rise into the air, such an obvious target would be very easy to attack. Everyone present was an expert, not to mention that he was facing the Zodiac Tiger Warrior. It was really puzzling for him to make such an unguarded move. Chi Yu quietly let go of Hai Ryue and Ming Ming's hands. He did not know why, but he had a premonition that Su Dong would not be able to block Su Ziyuan's attack. Just as Chi Yu was quietly condensing his Kirin Thundercloud force, ready to support Su Dong suddenly stopped all his movements and said in a clear voice, "Please wait for a moment, family head Su." The flame energy around Su Ziyuan's body did not show any signs of weakening. Instead, it became stronger. "What are you waiting for?" Su Dong's voice was very calm. "I didn't expect family head Su to have already mastered the Su family's secret technique, the great sun-destroying divine art. In order to not hurt the relationship between both parties, I admit defeat." As he spoke, his body floated backwards, and in a flash of white light, he had already returned to Chi Yu's side. Su Dong's sudden surrender not only stunned the 4 major families, but also caused a commotion among the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Yan Xiaoi said in shock, "I say, Brother Dong, why did you just admit defeat like that? Are you impotent?" Su Dong's voice was much lower. As a Zodiac Tiger warrior, his voice was one of his abilities. With his current strength, he could completely control his voice to a very small area. The great sun-destroying divine art is the Su family's secret technique. I didn't expect grandfather to use such a powerful technique in the first round. It is impossible to successfully cultivate the great sun-destroying divine art. Every time it is used, it will consume one's life force. In other words, using the great sun-destroying divine art will reduce one's lifespan. But it is undeniable that the great sun-destroying divine art is one of the strongest fire attribute abilities. It is precisely because of the huge price that it has to pay that its power is extremely terrifying. I am the eldest son of the Su family, which is why I have the opportunity to learn this divine art. If I want to fight against grandfather's great sun-destroying divine art, I will have to use the great sun-destroying divine art. Perhaps when I reach the 6 clouds and have a second origin mutation, I will have a chance to resist it. Since I will definitely lose, why should I waste grandfather's lifespan? Sigh, the word name is really harmful. In order to obtain a high enough position among the 4 major families, grandfather actually used such a domineering ability in the first round. The red light around Su Ziyuan's body gradually dissipated. When he floated to the ground, his face was no longer as rosy as before. Hundreds of meters away, he looked at Su Dong and said in a deep voice, "Tiger warrior, may I ask how you know the Su family's secret? It seems that not everyone knows about the great sun-destroying divine art." Su Dong smiled slightly, still using the same deep voice as before. "There is no absolute secret in this world. It is not that the Su family has not used the great sun-destroying divine art before. I have inherited the Zodiac Tiger's ability, and also a part of his memory. Naturally, I can think of what the family head is using. Alright, now that we're tied, I wonder which patriarch you'll send out next?" After listening to Su Dong's explanation, Chi Yu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The moment Su Dong admitted defeat, not only him, but every Zodiac Guardian warrior also had a trace of doubt in their hearts. It must be known that although there were a total of 10 matches today, for the Zodiac Guardian warriors, each match was extremely crucial. As the second strongest of the Zodiac Guardian warriors, Su Dong was defeated just like that. This would definitely have a huge impact on the entire competition. Chi Yu looked at Hai Ryue, and Hai Ryue nodded at him. The two simply exchanged a glance, and they could see the trust in each other's eyes towards Su Dong. Shenjue slowly walked out from the side of the 4 great families, and stood beside Su Ziyuan. He didn't know what the great sun-destroying divine art was, but Su Ziyuan had actually scared off the Zodiac Tiger warrior. He couldn't help but look at the Su family in a new light. He was a very ambitious person, otherwise he wouldn't have gathered the 4 great families to the capital to hold this exchange meeting with the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Su Ziyuan's victory would greatly increase the Su family's prestige, so he naturally couldn't allow it. With a faint smile on his face, Shenjue's gaze directly met Chi Yu's. "In the 2 matches just now, both sides have won 1 match. Our side has sent out experts of the 4 great families. I wonder if the Zodiac King, Sir Kirin, would you be willing to give us some pointers?" Challenging the Zodiac King sounded very imposing, but everyone present knew that Kirin had always been the Zodiac Guardian warrior's weakest point, but also the strongest point. He was said to be weak because his attack and defense abilities were much weaker than the other Zodiac Guardian warriors. He was said to be the strongest because he could obtain the protection of all the Zodiac Guardian warriors, and he could also use all kinds of support abilities to help the other Zodiac Guardian warriors. Therefore, when the Zodiac Guardian warriors first appeared, the ancient beast's first target would definitely be Kirin. As time passed, with the efforts of the generations of Zodiac Guardian warriors, the number of ancient beasts had decreased, and they rarely came out to cause trouble. However, Kirin's weakness had already become an open secret among the Eastern Guardians. However, although Kirin wasn't strong, he was definitely the core of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Shenjue's challenge was enough to show his viciousness. Ming Ming coldly snorted and said, "I am enough to deal with you, there's no need for Kirin to come out." Shenjue deliberately acted surprised and said, "Oh? Could it be that Kirin is afraid to fight? I think so. As the Zodiac King, Kirin. He wouldn't let his partner bear anything for him, right?" Vol angrily said behind Chi Yu, "This old fellow is really sinister, boss, don't be fooled." Original attribute mutation. Ming Ming's eyes shone brightly, multicolored feathers appeared out of thin air, and a gorgeous brilliance surrounded her body, quickly producing the mutation. It was clearly as light as a feather, almost weightless. "Wait a minute, Ming Ming." Chi Yu smiled. Those who were familiar with him could clearly see that it was the lascivious smile that he was most accustomed to revealing. Ming Ming turned around and looked at Chi Yu. Seeing that familiar smile, she didn't know why, but she didn't feel annoyed. Instead, she felt that it was very cordial. "What? Let me go for the 3rd round. If I lose, there's still Brother Guan and Sister Mo." Chi Yu shook his head and said, I think Patriarch Shin is right. I think Patriarch Shin is right. As a Qilin, how can I let my companions bear all the pressure on my behalf? So, I'll go for this round. Even if I lose, it won't be a loss for us. We won't suffer any losses, so you guys can take a rest. Su Dong gave a thumbs up to Chi Yu and said in a low voice, "Boss, good job. You even came up with the strategy of Tianji's horse race." In his understanding, Chi Yu's decision to go for the first round was to kill the opponent's expert and lay the foundation for the other Zodiac warriors to win the final victory. After all, each side only had one person to compete in 2 rounds, and the strongest of the 4 families were naturally the 4 patriarchs. As long as one person was killed, it would be a lot easier for the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Su Dong was a smart man, and immediately thought of the possibility that Chi Yu's appearance would affect the whole competition. "No, you can't go." Hai Ryue pulled Chi Yu. Chi Yu looked at her and said, "Why?" Hai Ryue's blue eyes hidden behind the mask flashed, and for a moment, she couldn't think of a reason to stop him. Su Dong had already pointed out Chi Yu's tactics. "That's right. What reason do I have to stop him?" Ming Ming said, "Yes, Chi Yu, you can't go. This is not a joke. They are all experts. If you get injured, what will we do?" After saying the last sentence, she couldn't help but blush. Chi Yu laughed and said, "With the care of 2 beauties, I feel 100 times more spirited now. Isn't it just the Shin family's patriarch? I'll beat him to show you. Don't forget, I'm an immortal cockroach, he can't hurt me." His right hand slightly twisted, and he unexpectedly broke free from Hai Ryue's hand, and strode towards Shinzhuo. Chi Yu's voice was very loud, so Shinzhuo naturally heard it clearly. He was so angry that his nose almost became crooked. "This little ruffian actually dares to show off in front of me. Even if I can't kill him, I'll teach him a lesson this time." Chi Yu had already walked out. He wasn't just representing himself now, but Kirin and all the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Even if Hai Ryue was more overbearing, she couldn't pull him back at this time. Standing at the back of the team, she shouted, "Be careful." Chi Yu turned around and smiled. "Don't worry. If I win, how about you devote your life to me? Go die." Hai Ryue and Ming Ming reprimanded him in unison. After the 2 finished speaking, they came to their senses and looked at each other. Fortunately, they had already used their origin mutation, so even if their faces were red, it wouldn't be seen. Behind them, Modi covered his mouth and chuckled. Looking at the chubby vole, he couldn't help but become a little silly. Yan Xiaoi nudged Su Dong and said in a low voice, "Brother Su, pay attention to saving boss later." Su Dong unhappily rolled his eyes at him and said, "I know, I don't need you to remind me." Yan Xiaoi's eyes almost popped out. I. Fuck Su Dong, you're too lewd. I'll call you Aunt Dong from now on." Su Dong used his soft voice and said, "Whatever you want. Your little hand is quite white. You must be new." As he said that, he was already caressing Yan Xiaoi's right hand. Yan Xiaoi screamed and fiercely pulled back his hand, wiping it on his clothes. "Su Dong, you perverted tiger." Chu Dong laughed and said, "Brat, learn a little. You're still too inexperienced. In this kind of situation, it's not good to be nervous." Yan Xiaoi speechlessly looked at Su Dong. The pressure in his heart had indeed reduced by a lot. This was the first time he had seen such a scene. Although he didn't have to go on stage, the pressure was still there. Su Dong had already seen his nervousness, so he teased him at this time to help him relax. Comparing the degree of lewdness, Yan Xiaoi was obviously a bit worse than Su Dong. At the side, Guan Ping and Modi couldn't help but laugh. Only Tian Quan's gaze fell on Modi. He was also the least nervous out of all the Zodiac Guardian warriors, because his heart wasn't on the current competition. Chi Yu had already walked in front of Chenzhuo. He faintly smiled and said, "I really didn't expect that we would meet again so soon." "We meet again so soon. How is big sister Yun?" Chenzhuo deeply looked at Chi Yu. The man in front of him, who he thought was a ruffian, was actually able to remain calm in front of so many experts. This didn't seem to be an ability that a ruffian should have. Yun-Er is very good, but her strength is still weak. She can't participate in this kind of exchange. Can we start now? Your Excellency Kirin. Chi-Yu faintly smiled and said, please. He made an inviting gesture. His right hand pulled Kirin, and his body disappeared into thin air. Chunjua was startled, but his reaction was very fast. When Chi-Yu had appeared, he had already guessed that this ruffian Kirin had a treasure that could make him invisible. So, when Chi-Yu's body had just disappeared, Chunjua's right fist blasted forward, and a cyan energy was emitted. It covered every inch of land within 10 meters in front of him. Chunjua knew that Chi-Yu's strength wasn't strong. As long as he was able to attack him, his spirit would automatically lock onto him. Even if he was invisible, he wouldn't be able to escape his detection. Unfortunately, Chunjua's plan failed. His energy completely blasted into thin air. Chi-Yu seemed to have completely disappeared, not even a trace was left behind. If it was anyone else, they might have already been stumped by Chi-Yu's strange invisibility ability. However, Chunjua wasn't. As the Chun family's patriarch, his thoughts were extremely meticulous. Before he went out to challenge Chi-Yu, he had already thought about it very clearly. Naturally, he would also consider how to deal with Chi-Yu after he became invisible. The Chun family's abilities were based on the Eastern wood element. They didn't have the Zhou family's tyrannical attack and defense, nor did they have the Su family's overbearing fire attribute abilities. However, as the most active wood element, the Chun family had the most variety of abilities. At the same time, they were also the family that relied on spirit the most. This could be seen from Chun Yun's ability, Soul Storm. Chunjua protected his chest with one hand and closed his eyes. The green light surrounding his body was completely restrained. In about the time it took for a breath, everyone present had a strange feeling in their hearts. It was as if there were suddenly countless eyes in the sky, staring at every part of their bodies. Of course, there were no eyes. It was a phenomenon caused by Chunjua's spirit. The enormous spirit was like a large net that enveloped the entire mountain top. This kind of spirit fluctuation was definitely not as simple as detecting auras. Even the most advanced radar couldn't compare to it. With Chunjua's ability, he could only cover the entire mountain top. Suddenly, Chunjua's eyes lit up. His gaze froze in a direction to his right. Chun family's patriarch is indeed powerful, to actually be able to break through my Kirin invisibility. With a flash of light, Chi-Yu's body appeared out of thin air. Although he still had a smile on his face, his heart was filled with shock. When he used Kirin invisibility, Chi-Yu did not think of using Kirin invisibility to help him defeat Chunjua, because Kirin invisibility would automatically lose its invisibility effect when he attacked. However, he never would have thought that Chunjua would actually use his spiritual energy to probe and force him out. It was an energy fluctuation similar to a bat's detection wave, but it was even more subtle. Nothing was without flaws, and Kirin invisibility was the same. Furthermore, with Chi-Yu's current strength, he was still far from being able to perfectly use Kirin invisibility. Chunjua smiled indifferently and said, "It's just a small trick. I think, now I can have a fair fight with Sir Kirin." As he spoke, his gaze never left the Kirin invisibility behind Chi-Yu. Although he had found Chi-Yu, he had also used up a lot of his spiritual energy. This kind of invisibility magic treasure had already quietly aroused his covetous heart. Chi-Yu shrugged his shoulders and said, "Then Patriarch, come." Kirin invisibility still did not take it off. Chi-Yu only stood there with his head slightly lowered, looking at the ground in front of him. No one could see that the current his gaze had already become sharp. Chunjua naturally wanted to end the battle in front of him as soon as possible. His body floated forward, and like moving clouds and flowing water, he arrived 3 meters in front of Chi-Yu. He had never been a careless person, and his right fist struck out through the air, aiming straight for Chi Yu's chest. At the same time that Chun's fist struck out, Chi Yu suddenly raised his head. When their gazes collided in the air, Chun suddenly felt as if his brain had exploded. What did he see? He saw a pair of silver eyes, a pair of lifeless and emotionless eyes. Just that one glance had already greatly reduced Chun's momentum, and the punch that he sent out was immediately slowed down by half a beat. Chi Yu's body moved. He was like a leopard that was full of energy, and his body instantly moved horizontally by 1 meter, causing Chun's punch to hit empty air. Immediately after, his left foot touched the ground, and his body shot straight towards Chun's chest like an arrow. His fist was like an explosive that could explode at any time, and in Chun's eyes, it suddenly became bigger. Chunjwa being able to sit in the position of Qin family's patriarch was obviously not as simple as luck. Suddenly noticing the change in Chi Yu's body, he did not hesitate in the slightest to seal his palms. With a loud bang, Chi Yu's right fist fiercely struck the palms of his hands that were raised up. A green light shone and Chunjwa's body was blasted backwards. He only managed to stabilize his body after flying for a full 10 meters. Chi Yu did not chase after him. After he blasted out his fist, he stood at the position where Chunjwa was previously, and shook his head, flinging his elegant black hair to the back of his head. At this moment, everyone could see the silver light in his eyes. Chi Yu looked at Chunjwa. There was no longer a smile on his face, and the air around his body seemed to have solidified. No matter how one looked at it, the silver light in Chi Yu's eyes was ice-cold. That abnormally cold light fell on Chunjwa's face. Patriarch Qin, today I want to tell you something, and also tell the 4 great families something. Never underestimate the Zodiac Guardian, and even more so, never underestimate the Zodiac King. If you want to challenge the dignity of the Zodiac Guardian, then I, as the Zodiac King Kirin, am willing to accept all of your challenges. As he spoke, Chi Yu fiercely shook his right arm, and the clothes on his right arm immediately turned into flying ash. His solid muscles swelled to twice their original size, and black and silver patterns continuously flowed on his right arm. Traces of electricity revolved around his right arm, flickering back and forth like small snakes. Chapter 52. Although Chunjwa, who was 10 meters away, tried his best not to reveal a pained expression, his hands were hanging by his sides, trembling slightly. Even in the dark, the powerful Zodiac warriors were still able to capture the changes in his body. That punch had happened before Chi Yu's right hand had changed, and not after. To be able to force the head of the Shin family, one of the 4 great families, to retreat with a single punch, it could be seen how powerful Chi Yu's strength was. After a short moment of surprise, Chunjwa immediately recovered. His gaze focused on Chi Yu's arm. This is Kirin's ability? Chi Yu raised his head and looked at the sky. At this moment, his heart seemed to no longer be in the arena. It was as if he could see the scene of Kirin leading the ancient divine beasts to gallop across the land of Yen Huang in ancient times. Kirin has been buried for too many years. Now, it's time for him to stand up again. Head of the Shin family, don't you think that your question is a little too childish? Chunjwa snorted coldly. This is just one of the Kirin techniques that you have mastered. If you think that you can win against me with this, then I can tell you with certainty that you are wrong. Strength is important, but strength cannot represent everything. As he said this, he had already stepped forward again, and walked towards Chi Yu step by step. Chi Yu looked at him indifferently. Although he had only been in the Taklamakan for a month, he had experienced too much in that 1 month. He did not know how many times he had struggled on the edge of life and death. Not only had his strength undergone an earth-shattering transformation, his mentality had also changed. The 3rd stage of the Taklamakan had been the most painful 10 days of Chi Yu's entire life. However, it was also those 10 days that Chi Yu had experienced. However, it was precisely those 10 days that had raised him to another level. Shun's shoulders shook slightly, and he let out a low shout. He took half a step forward with his right foot, and a light gradually rose behind him. In an instant, his hair and beard stood on end, and Chi-Yu could clearly feel a powerful energy wave coming from beneath his feet. Almost subconsciously, he did a backflip and floated back 5 meters. Boom! The place where Chi-Yu was originally standing was filled with stone fragments. 2 huge vines drilled out from below and immediately attacked Chi-Yu without any hesitation. The vines were as thick as buckets, and from their dark green color, they did not seem tough at all. Controlling plants? Chi-Yu was startled. The ability that the plant's soul had used back then was still vivid in his mind. The vines that the plant's soul had used were far less powerful than the ones that Chen Zhuo was using. Chi-Yu didn't use his hands to block. His intuition told him that the vines in front of him were definitely not simple. His feet moved slightly, and his body was like a small boat in the middle of the storm-like attack of the 2 huge vines. On the surface, Chi-Yu didn't seem to be moving very fast. Everyone present could clearly see his figure, but no one could tell where he would move next. Gradually, someone noticed something strange and exclaimed, "Look at his feet!" That's right. Chi-Yu's feet had already disappeared into thin air at this time, leaving behind a series of afterimages. Compared to the stability of his upper body, although every movement of his seemed to be very slow, it was actually countless movements combined together in an instant. If one didn't have extremely high spiritual power, they would not be able to distinguish it at all. But even if Chen Zhuo's spiritual power was extremely strong, he could only be led by the nose by this mysterious movement technique. No matter how he tried, he couldn't see where he would move to. Hai Rue and Su Dong looked at each other. It was hard for Su Dong to conceal the shock in his voice. "Rue, when did he become so strong? Did you teach him this movement technique?" Hai Rue smiled bitterly and said, "I also wanted to ask you. Also, what happened to his right arm? When he came back from the military training this time, I felt that there was something wrong with the aura on his body, but the intensity of his energy was no different from before. How could there suddenly be a qualitative change? In fact, how could she know that after Chi-Yu's strength increased, the first thing he practiced was Kiran's aura concealment technique? Although it wasn't very brilliant, at Hai Ryua's level, she wouldn't be able to sense the fundamental change if she didn't carefully observe him. The Chi-Yu in battle looked a little strange. There was a dark red cloak draped over his back, and his right arm was bare. The muscles on his arm were like granite, full of power. Especially the black and silver light that was constantly circulating, it looked even more tyrannical. His upper body didn't move, but his lower body constantly transformed into a series of afterimages. While dodging, Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a focused light. He was paying attention to Chen Zhuo's attack route and method, as well as the intensity of the vine's attacks. Suddenly, Chi-Yu staggered and his body slowed down. Of course, Chen Zhuo wouldn't give up such an opportunity. 2 vines flashed and arrived. Chi-Yu's right arm was already entangled by the vines, and his body was directly lifted into the air by the huge force brought by the vines. Chen Zhuo's face revealed a trace of relief. In this kind of situation, no matter what ability Chi-Yu had, he was already at a complete disadvantage. Among espers, they were generally divided into spiritual-type abilities and energy-type abilities. Spiritual-type abilities were mostly support-type abilities. Even if it was a spiritual-type ability with overbearing attack power, it couldn't be easily used. Once it backfired, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, although Chen Zhuo's energy strength was very strong, most of his abilities were support-type abilities. Moreover, Chi-Yu's sudden change made him vigilant in his heart. He didn't use the spiritual-type attack that he was most proficient in, and the 2 vines he used were one of his strongest attacks. Even if it was compared to Zhou Tianlu's metal armor, it wasn't much weaker. Not only was it hard, it was also full of toughness. Ming Ming let out a cry of alarm. Just as she was about to rush out to save Chiyu, she was pulled back by Ryue, who said in a low voice, "Don't go, he did it on purpose." Ming Ming looked at Ryue in shock. Ryue squeezed her soft little hand and said in a voice that only Ming Ming could hear, "The top of the mountain is flat." His footwork has always been like moving clouds and flowing water. He didn't touch anything at all, so how could he have suddenly tripped? He definitely has his own thoughts. Chiyu's body was brought 7 to 8 meters into the air by the vines. The vines contracted inwardly, tightly wrapping around Chiyu's right arm while wrapping around his body. Chiyu's left hand moved. He pointed in the air, and a purple lightning suddenly appeared. It launched an attack in an arc in the air, bypassing the vines that were wrapping around his right arm, and directly wrapping around the other vine on Kirin's arm. Below, Shun's whole body shook, and his right leg trembled violently. The purple lightning instantly spread up from his feet. Shun's body trembled, but the vines that were wrapping around Chiyu's right arm still didn't loosen. Shunzhua let out a low shout, and the color of his skin suddenly changed, turning into a withered yellow color. It was as if his body had aged in an instant. At the same time, his eyes burst with light as he looked at Chiyu, who was already wrapped by his vines in the air. Lightning Kirin. It's actually the rare lightning Kirin. Unfortunately, lightning doesn't pass through dead wood. My dead wood has a very good filtering effect on energy attacks, especially lightning energy. The vines tightened, causing the bones in Chiyu's body to make a cracking sound. The silver light in Chiyu's eyes weakened a lot. Shin family head. The vines you used don't seem to be a plant ability. Otherwise, my vines wouldn't be able to affect your body. Shunzhua said indifferently, but as you said, this isn't a plant ability, but one of my capital's Shin family's secret skills. I implant a special seed into my body and use my own blood essence and energy to raise it, making it a part of my body. As time goes by, the Ghost King vine that I use will become one of my own abilities. Its toughness will be difficult to break even with a peerless weapon. Kirin, you can admit defeat now. No one has ever been able to break free from my Ghost King vine. As long as I'm willing, the Ghost King vine only needs to shrink. I can turn your body into a pool of blood. Chiyu curled his lips and said, "Is that really the case? Using one's body to raise a plant, this method is a bit strange. However, I have at least 2 ways to break free from your vines." Shunzhua sneered, "What's the use of just talking? Although you're a rare Thunder Kirin, I really can't see what other abilities you have right now." The silver light in Chiyu's eyes, which had originally weakened a lot, suddenly brightened. "Good, then I'll let you see. If I directly break free now, perhaps you'll think that I'm using a trick. That's good, so what if I directly take it on?" His last words were filled with arrogance. As the silver light in his eyes skyrocketed, he fiercely shouted. Kirin read. Bang! Flames soared into the sky, and a huge amount of fire energy particles instantly filled the air. The Chiyu in the air had changed. His silver eyes and black hair were the same as before, but his body was already covered with a layer of fiery red armor. The armor looked extremely thick, clearly belonging to the heavy type. Wearing it on Chiyu, who was 1.9 meters tall, made his body seem even taller. Su Zhuan cried out in alarm. Kirin's true fire. All plants were afraid of fire, and Kirin's true fire was the best of the best. At that time, even the 9-headed nether snake, who had cultivated for close to 10,000 years, couldn't do anything to Chiyu the moment Kirin Red appeared. Shunzhua's strength was obviously not on the same level as the 9-headed deep-sea nether snake. Shunzhua let out a blood-curdling screech. At the same time the Qilin arm appeared, his 2 vines retreated as if they had been electrocuted. Even so, the instant they came into contact, the 2 vines were burnt to the point of being charred black. Chiyu's body floated down from 7 or 8 meters in the air. His expression wasn't very good. Fuck your lungs. I hate it when people throw me into the air. Patriarch Shin, I'm going to start my counterattack. As his voice fell, his body had already pounced forward like a cheetah. His right fist became his main point of attack, and he attacked Shunzhuo with one punch after another. Shunzhuo's rhythm had obviously been disrupted by Qiyu. While he was dodging Qiyu's attacks, his right leg seemed to be extremely inflexible. The scorching flames emitted by Kirin Red made him feel extremely uncomfortable. As the saying goes, fire subdues wood. Fire energy had always been what he hated the most. It was also because of this that the relationship between the Shun and Su families among the four great families wasn't very good. Zhou Tianlu and Luo Changxin looked at each other. Both of them could see the astonishment in each other's eyes. From the experiences passed down from the four great families, there had never been a Kirin who was able to force a patriarch of a family to the point of not being able to retaliate. Luo Changxin said somewhat hoarsely, "Thunder and fire dual attributes, Kirin." Thunder and fire, these two attributes, practically restrained all the attribute abilities of the four great families. Fire subdued wood and thunder subdued gold. Metal was one of the best conductive materials. Zhou Tianlu asked himself if he had the ability to resist the attack of thunder attribute energy. Although he still couldn't figure out the extent of Qiyu's ability, fire and thunder naturally wouldn't be at a disadvantage against the Su family's fire. As for water, which could restrain fire, when encountering thunder and lightning energy, unless it was pure water energy without impurities, it would similarly conduct electricity. At this time, Shunzhua had already suffered a great loss. The clothes in front of his body had already turned into a scorched black color. Because of the property of fire subduing wood, the green light that originally protected his body had already become a lot weaker. It was unknown when, but a diamond-shaped red symbol had already appeared between Kirin's eyebrows, and the silver moonlight in his eyes had increased. Shunzhua shouted loudly, and his hands came together in front of his chest, fiercely blocking Qiyu's ferocious punch. His eyes instantly shone brightly, and two golden lights shot out of his eyes, shooting straight into Qiyu's eyes like sharp arrows. In such a disadvantageous situation, he finally couldn't help but use the spiritual energy attack that he was most proficient in. This wasn't the first time that Qiyu had encountered a spiritual energy attack. However, it was different this time. That golden light was simply impossible to dodge. Even if he stepped on Kirin and continuously changed his position, that golden light still drilled into his eyes. Spiritual energy attacks had always been one of the most tyrannical special ability attacks. As long as it couldn't injure the enemy, it would inevitably injure the user. Thus, after Qiyu was hit by Shunzhua's spiritual attack, both of their bodies stopped for a moment at the same time. The red Kirin on Qiyu's body instantly disappeared because his spiritual energy was affected. As for Shunzhua, because he had blocked Qiyu's previous violent punch, he was shaken back more than 10 steps, gasping for breath. At this moment, Qiyu was feeling very strange. He didn't feel any pain, and illusions kept appearing in his mind. From his childhood memories, to his life as a hoodlum and ruffian, and then to the various strange things that he encountered after he became a Zodiac guardian warrior. Everything continuously flashed in his mind like a movie. He didn't know why, but he only felt his vision go black, and an intense pain came from his brain. His entire body trembled violently, and he didn't even have the time to be angry before he fell to the ground. Shunzhua had cultivated spiritual energy for dozens of years, so how could he deal with it casually? After going through the tempering of the Taklamakan, Qiyu's strength had greatly increased. However, in the face of Shunzhua's spiritual energy attack, he had only been slightly careless, and he had suffered a great loss. At this moment, he could only rely on his strong nerves to forcefully endure the intense pain, but he had also lost the ability to fight. When he saw the red Kirin disappear, Shunzhua immediately heaved a sigh of relief. When he saw Qiyu holding his head with his hands, and the silver light in his eyes dissipating, He was immediately overjoyed. He thought to himself, "Kid, you're still too inexperienced." Shenjue adjusted the energy in his body, took a step forward, and pressed his hands directly towards Qi Yu's chest. Although the green light was much weaker than before, the power of his attack could be seen from Shenjue's cold gaze. Playing with a big knife in front of Guan Yu. A voice suddenly sounded in Qi Yu's mind. Immediately after, the intense pain in his brain instantly disappeared, and a cool spiritual energy protected his brain. The spiritual energy that Shenjue had invaded his brain was completely removed. At this moment, Shenjue's attack had just arrived in front of Qi Yu. His body suddenly shook, and his hands slightly trembled. He abruptly retracted his hands that were originally attacking and took a few steps back. His eyes were filled with fear. His spiritual energy had been expelled. As the initiator, he felt it very strongly. However, the energy that expelled his spiritual energy did not retaliate. Otherwise, he would have already suffered heavy injuries. At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly emitted from Qi Yu's body. The black and silver light on his body became much dimmer, and a layer of blue energy overflowed in all directions. Qi Yu shouted in a low voice, "Envoy, appear." Lin. Light and shadow flickered, and the blue light gradually turned dark blue. A body that was 5 meters long and as thick as a bucket appeared out of thin air in front of Qi Yu. It was a snake with 9 heads. Its entire body was covered in dark blue scales that flickered with a terrifying light of death. It had 9 heads, and 18 red snake eyes flickered with a faint cold light. The 9 snake heads stared at Shenjue, causing a layer of cold sweat to appear on his back. He subconsciously took a few steps back. The silver light in Qi Yu's eyes had already recovered. "Patriarch Shin, although your mental strength is very strong, if you want to compete in mental strength, you can compete with my messenger." Envoy order? Zhou Tianlu walked out of the 4 great clans and looked at the nether snake in the deep sea. He said doubtfully, "This is clearly a vicious beast. Although his aura isn't very strong, why would he be with you Zodiac Guardian warriors?" There were many theories about the true secrets of Kirin, but very few people knew about the true abilities of Kirin. Qi Yu smiled faintly. "That's right, it's a vicious beast. However, we, the Kirin clan, can use the incantation 3 times in our lifetime. Each time, we can make a vicious beast into our servant and become Kirin's assistant. Therefore, you can see him as one with me. My God! This is the deep-sea nether snake, and it's a 9-headed one." Luo Changxin, who had never been born, couldn't help but cry out in surprise after thinking carefully. He cultivated water ability, so his understanding of water-attributed vicious beasts was much greater than that of the other clans. The deep-sea nether snake raised its 9 heads high, proudly looking at the humans in front of it. As it turned out, after Qi Yu received Shenjue's mental attack, the energy in his body fluctuated greatly, waking up the deep-sea nether snake that was sleeping. Although most of its energy had been transformed into the 9 blue sea thunder pearls, its mental strength was still there. The deep-sea nether snake wasn't a vicious beast that specialized in mental strength attacks, but after cultivating for more than 9,000 years, its mental strength was already extremely huge. Even if it couldn't be used to attack, it still had no problem helping Qi Yu resolve Shenjue's attack. After discovering this benefit, Qi Yu immediately summoned him. First, it was to deter, and second, it was to guard against Shenjue's subsequent mental attack. Looking at the puzzled gazes of the people from the 4 great clans, Luo Changxin took a deep breath and slowly said, "The deep-sea nether snake is the absolute king of the water and one of the 4 great ancient vicious beasts. As long as it's in the water, the deep-sea nether snake that has reached the realm of 10,000 years or more is almost invincible. The deep-sea nether snake will give birth to 1 head every 1,000 years of cultivation, and after 10,000 years, the 9 heads will return to 1, becoming the strongest overlord in the water. If it wasn't for the fact that once they left the water, they would only have 1/10 of their strength left. Perhaps the entire Yen Huang land would have been occupied by them. The body of the deep-sea nether snake in front of them shouldn't be so small, but its 9 heads were correct. King of the Zodiac, I'm not very clear about what you mean by commanding it, but I think you should already be controlling it, and you can use it for your own purposes. How about we discuss this? You give this deep-sea nether snake to our Luo clan, and from today onwards, the Northwest Luo clan will follow the lead of the Zodiac guardian god. His words were spoken very quickly, but without any hesitation. However, when he looked at the deep-sea nether snake, his eyes seemed to be emitting a red light. When Luo Zhangxin said the last sentence, the heads of the other 3 clans were greatly shocked. Luo Zhangxin had always been known for his steadiness, but he actually said such word. Clearly, this deep-sea nether snake was very attractive to their clans. Shenzhua had wrongly estimated Kirin's strength, and had already pushed the 4 clans back from a favorable situation. If they lost the support of another clan, under such circumstances, today's exchange would no longer have any meaning. Qi Yu said to the deep-sea nether snake through his spiritual energy, "I couldn't tell. You've even become a hot commodity." The deep-sea nether snake said unhappily, "You piece of trash, why did you bring me out? These small shrimps, if I had the strength I had in the past, I only care about blocking the spiritual energy attack for you, and you can settle the rest yourself. You should know that I'm still so weak." After losing the Blue Sea Divine Pearl, it still couldn't get over it. Qi Yu shook his head helplessly and said to Luo Changxin, "I'm sorry, Patriarch Luo, the token is connected to Kirin's life, so it can't be given away. Besides, I wouldn't give my partner away to anyone. Patriarch Shen, do we still want to continue the battle just now?" As he spoke, he waved his hand slightly, and the deep-sea nether snake's body turned into a dark blue airflow and directly merged into his body. After the deep-sea nether snake was devoured by Qi Yu, the nether snake's body had been destroyed. Just as he said, it had become a part of him. Therefore, there was no need for the Kirin orb to survive. Shenzhua's face alternated between red and white. His aura became unstable. His attack power was indeed not strong. Although he still had many abilities that he had not used, however, he knew very well that if he continued to fight, he would not stand a chance at all. The 2 abilities that the Zodiac King Kirin had displayed were extremely overbearing. Especially that fiery red armor, it was Qi Yu's own best ability. Seeing that Shenzhua did not speak, Qi Yu put his hands behind his back. At this moment, he seemed to see the scene of his ancestor, Kirin, galloping on the battlefield during the era of the ancient beasts, fearlessly contending against the beasts. At the same time, he also remembered the story behind the 3 treasures of Kirin that he had. He did not know why, but a surge of hot blood rushed to his heart. The silver light in Qi Yu's eyes swept across the 4 great clans in front of him, and he said indifferently, "How about this? 10 rounds of competition is too long, why don't we settle it in one go? 4 patriarchs, come at me at the same time. We will exchange 3 moves, and if I am lucky enough not to lose, then today's matter will be considered as our Zodiac Guardian's victory. If I lose, then I will send out the Zodiac Guardian. How about it?" Although his voice was very calm. But what he said shocked everyone like a stormy sea. "Qi Yu, boss, you're crazy." The Zodiac Guardian warriors hurriedly rushed to Qi Yu's side. They could not believe that Qi Yu would actually make such a request. The elites of the 4 great clans indeed had very strict family rules, but Qi Yu's words were too provocative. As long as it was a man with a little bit of courage, they would not be able to endure this kind of insult. For a moment, sharp rebukes constantly rang in the ears of the 4 great clans. Qi Yu acted as if he did not hear the exclamations of the Zodiac Guardian warriors, nor did he hear the curses of the 4 great clans. He smiled indifferently and said, "4 patriarchs, don't tell me you don't even dare to do this. 3 attacks should be enough to decide the outcome." Luo Changxin frowned and said in a cold voice, "You are challenging the dignity of the four great clans." Chi Yu sneered. "Then what do you mean by holding this exchange meeting today? Aren't you challenging the dignity of the Zodiac Guardian warriors? Don't talk to me about dignity. Dignity is not given by others but by yourself. What you have done today, in front of us, the Zodiac Guardian warriors, you have no dignity to talk about." Si Zhuan was furious. "Kirin, you have to be responsible for your words. Fine, if you can withstand 3 attacks from us today, it will be enough to prove that you have the ability to lead the Eastern Guardian. So what if the 4 great clans attach themselves to the Zodiac Guardian warriors again? However, if you lose, it will not be enough for you to withdraw from the competition." Chi Yu raised his eyebrows. "Then what do you want?" Zhou Tianlu said, "If you lose, we don't want to make things difficult for the Zodiac Guardian warriors. But in the future, when the Eastern Guardian warriors have any collective action, I hope you can cooperate with the 4 great clans." His words were very tactful, but the meaning was very clear. If it was only him, Chi Yu would have already agreed, but the other side's condition was related to all the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Although he was the Zodiac King, he could not make this decision on behalf of all his companions. Slowly turning around, he looked at the 7 people behind him. At this time, their eyes were all focused on him. Taking a deep breath, Chi Yu said in a low voice, "Do you believe me?" It was a simple question, but it made the entire Guijian Chou Peak become silent. At this time, Chi Yu no longer had the slightest ruffian habit. Under the contrast of Kirin Yin and Kirin's arm, his figure seemed a little lonely, but as steady as a rock. "Boss, I believe you." The first to speak was impressively Vol. Chi Yu's gaze met his and a trace of warmth flowed from the silver light in his eyes. As expected of his best brother, he would always stand by his side no matter what. Yan Xiaoi shrugged and said, "It doesn't matter to me. You are the boss, I will listen to you." Although his handsome face looked a little wretched, the light in his eyes was very clear. The strength that Hai Ryu and Chi Yu had shown previously had a huge impact on him. Only now did he truly realize how strong the Zodiac Guardian warriors were. It was also from now on that he felt proud to be a Zodiac Guardian warrior. Both of them were young, although Chi Yu's actions were a little impulsive, it was also in line with Yan Xiaoi's temperament. Guan Ping said, "Chi Yu, calm down first. Now that we have 2 wins and 1 loss, we already have the advantage. Looking at the situation, 3 of the 4 big families have already fought. The possibility of us winning the final victory is very high. Why do you still take the risk?" Hai Ryu nodded and said coldly, "Chi Yu, Guan Ping's meaning is my meaning." Chi Yu didn't say anything. He looked at Feng Dong, Modi and Ming Ming. "What about you?" Feng Dong said, "Chi Yu, you should understand what you represent now, right? Don't be impulsive." Modi nodded, obviously agreeing with Feng Dong's opinion. Ming Ming was even more anxious. "Chi Yu, don't make trouble, come back quickly." Chi Yu nodded and said, "Okay, I understand." Only 2 out of 7 people supported him, but Chi Yu didn't have any dissatisfaction. Words are like spilled water, I will take responsibility for everything I say. Turning around, he faced the 4 big families' patriarchs. "My companions don't agree. I represent all the Zodiac Guardian warriors to fight against the 4 of you. However, since you said that I have hurt your dignity, I will naturally give you an answer. Now, I can only represent myself and exchange 3 moves with you. If I block 3 moves from you, you can't make things difficult for the Zodiac Guardian warriors in the future, and you must cooperate with us. You don't have to rely on us, but you must not be restrained." At this time, Shenzhua had already calmed down a little. He said coldly, "What if you can't block 3 moves from us?" Chi Yu smiled indifferently. He only said 2 words, "I will die." "Chi Yu, you're crazy." Ming Ming couldn't bear it anymore. She rushed to Chi Yu's side, grabbed his left arm, and anxiously stared into his eyes. Chi Yu looked at Ming Ming, the silver light in his eyes converged, his clear eyes became unusually gentle, He gently stroked Ming Ming's beautiful short hair. He smiled and said, "I'm not crazy, I'm very clear-headed, I naturally have my own reasons for doing this. Kirin, in ancient times, was the king of the divine beast. I want to tell the 4 big families what is Kirin's dignity. In the face of any challenge, Kirin will not retreat. I want to use my own strength to convince them. Believe me, although I can't compare to the 4 patriarchs' strength, blocking 3 moves is not impossible." Chapter 53. Qiyu smiled. He understood a lot of things from Ming Ming's eyes. "Don't worry, I will live. I still have to help you solve your own problems." "My problems?" Before Ming Ming could ask any more questions, Qiyu had already walked out. Hai Ruyue, who was standing not far behind him, had a complicated look in her eyes. She lifted her foot several times, but she did not take that step. Qiyu's words had already reached this point. He had actually used his life as the price for this match. Just as he had said, he was now representing the Qilin's dignity. Standing in front of the 4 patriarchs, Qiyu felt the Kirin's octatic treasures on his body, and his heart was filled with emotion. Kirin's pearl, Kirin's red, and Kirin's hidden, which had a sad story. Each one of them was the result of the ancestor Kirin's painstaking effort. Today, he could finally use the identity of Kirin to represent Kirin to accept the challenge. From the moment Qiyu proposed to fight the 4 patriarchs, he never thought that he would fail, nor did he think about his future. His heart had become one with Kirin's bloodline. The 4 patriarchs slowly stepped forward, and they stood in different positions. Their eyes were focused on Qiyu. Although they had not moved yet, the full force of the 4 super ability users was like 4 invisible mountains, pressing down on Qiyu. Qiyu's body stopped there, facing such a huge pressure. He did not retreat. Under the huge pressure, he roared fiercely, and the clothes on his upper body were all turned into powder, flying in all directions, revealing the muscles on his body. Qiyu's muscles were not in an extremely exaggerated shape, but every single bronze-colored muscle had an exceptionally beautiful contour that connected with each other. Following his heroic roar, it was as if all the muscles in his body had turned into a source of strength. The image of a Qilin on his chest and back appeared. The image looked very clear, and a silver light surrounded Qiyu's body. Kirin's image was released, and it turned into a huge light shadow that floated behind Qiyu's back. Immediately, Qiyu's suppressed aura moved, and he was barely able to resist the pressure from the 4 family heads. Curling his lips, Qiyu said disdainfully, "Is this all you can give me?" The expressions of the 4 patriarchs changed at the same time. Zhou Tianlu's lips moved slightly, as if he was saying something. The other 3 nodded in unison. The tragedy that happened more than 100 years ago was a deep regret for the 4 great families. They did not want to see the same thing happen again. Therefore, they did not plan to kill Qiyu. In this kind of situation where it was 4 against 1, they should win, but if they were really blocked by Qiyu for 3 moves, then the 4 great families would not be able to raise their heads in front of the Zodiac Guardian God in the future. Therefore, after a short discussion, they decided to use their strongest ability, and use spiritual pressure to directly make Qiyu admit defeat. This way, not only would it not hurt Qiyu, but it could also regain the face of the 4 great families. Spiritual pressure was not a true spiritual attack. Therefore, no one could help him. Zhou Tianlu's eyes shone brightly, and his body leaned forward. Metal armor appeared again, and he took a step forward. Immediately, there was a sonorous sound, and a deep footprint was left on the ground. Light golden energy formed a vortex around his body, and it constantly circulated. Shenzhua did not use his vines again, and a cyan light condensed into a ball of light in front of him. The ball of light was only the size of a fist, but it was dark green in color. In a situation where his ability was completely restrained by Qiyu, he condensed and compressed his own energy, forming a pure energy attack. This was also the best way to adapt to a situation where the attributes were mutually exclusive. fully compressed energy, no matter what attribute it was. Once it exploded, its power would be extremely shocking. Su Zhuan did not know why, but the anger on his face had disappeared. His actions were somewhat similar to Shunzhua's, but the energy he condensed was more terrifying than Shunzhua's. The fiery red light condensed into the shape of a firebird. The firebird was about 2 meters long, and its fire wings lightly flapping above Su Zhuan's head. His control over the fire attribute energy was enough to make anyone gasp in surprise. There were not too many types of abilities, and there were also no complex and gorgeous attacks. The simple fire was enough to help him complete all of his attacks. Luo Zhangxin, who had not made a move since the beginning, had already taken off his robe before he made his move, revealing the dark blue clothes inside. It was actually a set of sportswear, which appeared somewhat strange on his body. Luo Zhangxin crossed his arms in front of his chest, and a circle of blue light slightly trembled in front of him. Every time the blue light fluctuated, it would become a bit stronger. It was like a wave, and the blue light continuously rose up. During the process of the 4 patriarchs condensing energy, not only did it not reduce the pressure, it instead increased by several times. The 4 types of energy, metal, wood, fire, and water, rose and compressed unceasingly, causing the air in front of Qi Yu to distort. If it was an ordinary person, that enormous pressure might have already collapsed. Even Qi Yu, who had struggled to suppress his aura a bit earlier, was once again suppressed back. Even the phantom image of Kirin behind him had already become distorted, and was constantly struggling in the pressure. Under the invisible pressure, the muscles of Qi Yu's entire body reacted the most intensely. His spirit did not collapse, but the muscles of his body had already begun to slightly tremble. Although the pressure was invisible, it was even more dangerous than a tangible one. If the 4 patriarchs really wanted to destroy Qi Yu with all their strength, then as long as his spirit relaxed even a bit, he would immediately attract the simultaneous attack of the 4 patriarchs in an instant. The enormous pressure caused Qi Yu to reveal a pained expression. Gasping for breath, Qi Yu half knelt on the ground. "Have I passed the 3rd stage of the test?" The black shadow that was hidden in the formless said indifferently, "I guess so. Your various abilities are indeed wonderful. However, you have to remember that no matter what kind of abilities you have, you need to go through a special integration to fuse them together in order to exert the power of each ability." "I understand. My current cultivation has reached a bottleneck. I have tried many times, but I have not been able to break through. If I can break through this bottleneck, perhaps I will no longer be afraid of you. Can you tell me what is the best way to break through the bottleneck?" "Pressure. There is no pressure on people, they are light as a feather, but there is heavy pressure on the body. There is the ability to turn pressure into motivation." This sentence can be applied to any field, and it is also applicable to a paranormal like you. If it wasn't for the pressure that I brought to you and the pressure that the Taklamakan Desert brought to you, would you have been able to progress to this level in just a month? Wang Zhong thought to himself. Find enough pressure to make you feel pain. Only under great pressure can you better improve yourself. But you have to remember, using this method to improve your strength can be said to be a suicidal method of cultivation. This was because only those who were stronger than you would be able to exert life-threatening pressure on you. You should go back to your own world." Qi Yu said with some difficulty, "Can I call you those 2 words? There's no need. This is my responsibility. If you want to repay me, then use this sentiment on the Yan Huang Republic. Without a country there would be no home. Without a home there would be no me." Ha 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 ha. The memory flashed in his mind. Pressure is motivation. Yes. Only in the face of strong pressure can I produce a stronger reaction force, and can better display my potential. Facing the energy condensed by the 4 patriarchs, the unprecedented pressure. It filled Qi Yu with a sense of crisis, and it was under this feeling that the 4 thundercloud force in his body began to operate crazily. The Kirin pearl was the first to light up. The 4 colors of purple, blue, red, and green circulated, absorbing the 4 types of energy molecules in the air. Because of the energy used by the 4 patriarchs, the speed at which Chi-Yu absorbed the energy molecules was greatly increased. Next, Kirin Red did not wait for Chi-Yu to activate it. Under the great pressure, it automatically absorbed the Kirin thundercloud force in Chi-Yu's body. The red Kirin armor carried surging flames, and it made Chi-Yu's body, which was about to be unable to resist the pressure, feel lighter. The defense of Kirin Red was indeed strong. The aura produced by the fiery red armor could even resist the great pressure of the opponent. Unfortunately, the pressure produced by the 4 patriarchs was too great. The flames on Kirin Red were gradually suppressed, and a buzzing sound gradually appeared on the armor. In fact, the strength of the 4 patriarchs was around the strength of the 5 to 6 clouds Zodiac Guardian warriors. Even if there was only one of them, Chi-Yu might not be able to win. The reason why he was able to suppress Shenjue was not because of how strong his thundercloud force was, but because Shenjue was slightly careless at the beginning. In addition, the strength of Chi-Yu's body gave him a great shock, and in the end, he used the element to restrain Shenjue. If it was not for the deep-sea nether snake in Chi-Yu's body, he would have already lost because of Shenjue's spiritual counterattack. Although practicing hard for a month increased his strength by a lot, he only had 1 month. When Chi-Yu left Taklamakan, his strength had already reached the peak of the 2 clouds realm. 1 cloud for Kirin was equivalent to 1.5 clouds for an ordinary Zodiac warrior. The peak of the 2 clouds was at most the strength of an ordinary Zodiac warrior that was close to the 4 cloud. Chi-Yu's biggest advantage was obviously not the thundercloud force. The thundercloud force needed to be improved gradually. His main advantage was that he was one of the 4 auspicious clouds, Kirin. In terms of attributes, it could almost restrain any kind of special ability. Because of the external pressure, Kirin's red slightly shrunk inwards. Although the pressure on his body wasn't intense, it felt very obvious. Coupled with the external pressure, Chi-Yu immediately took a few steps back. However, he didn't give up. With a loud shout, he retracted Kirin's red and revealed his naked upper body. With an angry roar, every pore on Chi-Yu's body spurted out a mist of blood under the huge pressure. The Zodiac Guardian warriors took a step forward at the same time. The members of the 4 major families had been paying close attention to them. They immediately blocked the way from the surroundings. Every Zodiac Guardian warrior didn't understand why Chi-Yu didn't counterattack. Although a counterattack would inevitably attract the joint attack of the 4 patriarchs, in that case, he could still use his flexibility and the variety of his special ability to find some opportunities. Going against the pressure of the 4 patriarchs head-on was no different from courting death. Unless Chi-Yu's strength was comparable to the combined strength of the 4 patriarchs, but how was that possible? Ming Ming whispered to Hai Ryue, "Sister Ryue, what should we do? What is Chi-Yu doing?" Hai Ryue said angrily, "What is he doing? He's committing suicide. The patriarchs of the 4 major families are already holding back. They didn't directly attack him. Otherwise, he would be dead by now. Don't worry about him. I believe that the 4 patriarchs won't dare to kill Kirin. We'll deal with him later." Under the external pressure, the 4 types of thundercloud force in his body circulated even faster. Because of the excessive pressure, the energy of the thundercloud force began to show signs of condensing. Chi-Yu knew that once the energy condensed in his body, as long as it wasn't in his dantian, then his ability would be destroyed. Did he regret it? No, he didn't, because he once again felt the feeling he had in the Taklamakan desert. The Kirin bead in front of his chest suddenly became abnormally hot, and the Kirin bead on his back became abnormally cold. 1 hot and 1 cold energy collided violently in his body, and his whole body seemed to explode. The 4 types of thundercloud force became completely chaotic, and the thundercloud force instantly erupted and overflowed from the pores of his body without reservation. A warm flow of air flowed from the relic bead into Chi Yu's body, protecting his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. The peak of Tianxiang Mountain's Ghost Worry Peak suddenly darkened again. It wasn't only because of the dark clouds in the sky, but also because the light emitted by all the ability users on the scene had dimmed without any warning. Even the energy condensed by the 4 patriarchs was reduced by half in an instant. Suddenly, a huge light shadow soared into the sky. It was a galloping Kirin. It had a black body and silver hair, and it was stepping on 4 colored auspicious clouds. The moment it rushed into the sky, the silver light and the 4 colored auspicious clouds illuminated the entire peak of Ghost Worry Peak. 4 colored light beams descended from the sky and condensed at a point below. The sudden appearance of the light shadow seemed to draw out everything in the world, and this light shadow was formed by all the thundercloud force gushing out of Chi Yu's body. When the thundercloud force appeared, the energy had already changed from output to input. Hai Ryua's eyes widened, and she cried out involuntarily. A strange phenomenon appeared. Kirin changed. Could it be the pressure emitted by the 4 patriarchs was completely blocked by the light shadow, and their eyes were attracted by the Kirin shadow in the sky? Although it was only for a moment, Chi Yu below had already changed. His long black hair was draped over his back, and no one knew when it had started, but there was an additional strand of silver hair in the middle. His eyes, which were silver when he used the Kirin thundercloud force, had turned back to black. They were as black as ink, like 2 black gems without any impurities. His whole body was covered in a layer of black scale armor, and the black scale armor flickered with a faint cold light. Under the effect of the dark red Kirin cloak, the current Chi Yu looked like a demon god. However, he did not have a mask on his face like the other Zodiac guardian god warriors. His right arm was the most special. Only his right arm was not covered in black scales. The armor on his right arm was also black, but the black armor was inlaid with silver patterns. The silver patterns were very special. They were silver whorls with spikes protruding from the whorls. The whorls looked like a silver sun. His right arm was slightly larger than his left arm, but it was not as obvious as before. The Kirin orb appeared on the chest area of Chi Yu's black armor. The red diamond-shaped pattern that represented the Kirin crimson on Chi Yu's forehead protruded slightly. It shone with a dazzling light, and it looked like a red gem was embedded on his forehead. A layer of gentle blue light, accompanied by a ring of purple lightning, flickered around his body, reflecting the subtle changes that were happening to his body. The gigantic Kirin silhouette in the sky continued to emit intense light. Silver fur, and the 2-colored horn that stood proudly on top of its head. All of them were emitting a powerful Kirin aura. Yes, in the face of the huge pressure, Chi Yu's Qilin ascension technique finally made a qualitative leap. He advanced from the 2nd cloud realm to the 3rd cloud realm. He finally obtained the ability of origin mutation. Although it was only the first stage of mutation, his overall strength increased greatly after the mutation. The thundercloud force and thundercloud force in his body advanced to the 4th cloud realm under the effect of the 9 blue sea thunder orbs. However, Chi Yu clearly discovered that the energy of one of the 9 blue sea thunder orbs had disappeared. Instead, it had turned into a gem-like orb that quietly stayed in his body and no longer emitted energy wave. Master Zagru once told him that the strength of a normal Zodiac guardian god warrior would increase by 1.5 times with every increase in the ascension technique. As for Kirin, his strength would double with every increase in the ascension technique. In other words, it would double his original strength. In other words, when a normal Zodiac guardian god advanced to the 3rd cloud realm, his strength would be 2.25 times that of the 1st cloud realm. As for Kirin, his strength would be 4 times that of the 1st cloud realm when he advanced to the 3rd cloud realm. This was the advantage of the Zodiac guardian god warrior. The further he advanced, the more obvious this situation would be. With enough thundercloud force, the Zodiac Guardian's nature mutation and Chi Yu's Kirin's nature mutation could also double the strength of the Zodiac Guardian's nature mutation. For the last two stages of the Zodiac Guardian's nature mutation, the strength of the Zodiac Guardian's nature mutation could be increased by 1.5 times, while Chi Yu's nature mutation could be increased by 2 times. Therefore, the higher the cultivation of Kirin, the greater the gap between him and the Zodiac Guardian's nature mutation. Once the 9-cloud Kirin appeared, he would really be close to a god, or even a god. According to the thundercloud force, the strength of Hai Ryue at the 6th cloud realm was about 7.59 times that of the 1st cloud realm. Although Chi Yu had only advanced to the 3rd cloud realm, his thundercloud force and thundercloud force had actually reached the 4th cloud realm. According to the improvement of Kirin's ability, the strength of the 4-cloud Kirin was 8 times that of the 1st cloud realm. In other words, from a certain perspective, Chi Yu's current strength was already stronger than that of the strongest Zodiac Guardian god, Hai Ryue. Of course, this was without considering the nature mutation. Hai Ryue had already reached the 2nd stage of the nature mutation. From this perspective, Hai Ryue's overall strength was still much higher than Chi Yu's. But Chi Yu was Kirin of the 4-cloud realm. When he advanced to the 4th cloud realm, he could already be described as terrifying. The Kirin pearl on his chest flickered alternately with the 4 different lights. When the blue and purple lights flickered, they stayed a bit longer. From start to finish, it only took less than a minute. The 4 patriarchs of the 4 great clans and everyone present were stunned by the beautiful scene in front of them. The aura on Chi Yu's body didn't increase because of the changes on his body. Instead, it greatly weakened. Looking at the proud smile on his face, he looked like a harmless, ordinary person. However, the layer of scales on his body, that dim yet dangerous aura, was he really harmless to humans and animals? Breath control was one of Kirin's stealth abilities. Under the situation of Kirin's nature mutation, it naturally displayed its ability. Chi Yu didn't move. He stood there quietly, but the light in his eyes flickered continuously. Every time it flickered, the smile on his face grew a bit wider. He didn't know about his imposing manner. His achievements today were inseparable from his own hard work, but equally important was the help brought to him by the 17 Buddha's tooth relic beads on his wrist. Chi Yu's cultivation and the rash absorption of lightning on the plain last time were hard for even Kirin to bear. The Qilin was an auspicious sign from the heavens, and the invisible luck had helped him a lot. However, if it wasn't for the relic beads stabilizing all the unstable factors, stabilizing his state of mind and stabilizing his cloud power, he wouldn't have been able to break through to the 3rd cloud in such a short time. The 3 treasures of Kirin's 8 treasures, the relic bead, Chi Yu's unconstrained and dangerous cultivation method, and the stimulation of his latent potential, had allowed him to reach his current level in just half a year after inheriting Kirin's bloodline. The gazes of the 4 patriarchs quickly shifted from the sky to Chi Yu. Chi Yu's transformation made them feel that something was wrong, but even now, they didn't believe that Chi Yu could rely on his own strength to resist the all-out attack of the 4 of them. Under the situation of the nature mutation, Chi Yu's aura didn't expand outwards. It didn't give the 4 patriarchs any pressure. However, the current Chi Yu, who did not emit any aura, was like a giant abyss. No matter how much pressure the 4 patriarchs exerted, they were unable to pose the slightest threat to him. It was like a small boat swaying in the sea. It had become a stabilizing force in the raging wave. For the glory of the 4 families, the 4 patriarchs understood that this was not the time to solve the problem with deterrence. The gazes of the 4 became sharp, and the energy emitted from their bodies completely condensed. Within the energy whirlpool that flickered with a metallic luster, one could clearly see that there were many metallic stones flickering within. Compared to the previous battle with Hai Ryue, the stones now were much smaller. However, they had become even more powerful. green light balls, red light balls, and blue light balls, surging energy condensed at the same time as the aura of the metallized stones. Chi-Yu moved. Ever since he broke through the first cloud, he realized that his brain could stay awake no matter what situation he was in. In this kind of situation, even though he was close to Hai Ryue's strength, he also understood that with just himself, how could he fight against 4 patriarchs? So, he could only move, not move. He could only die. Kirin, don't use my mystic steps. The first step that Chi-Yu took was not forward, but to the front left of his body. His body slightly twisted, and then his whole body was like a cheetah that was ready to pounce. In an instant, the 4 colors of light from the Kirin pearl on the chest of the black armor suddenly separated. The 4 colors of light rushed out from the Kirin pearl at the same time, and a strange scene appeared. 4 figures rushed out from the black armor at the same time. They were purple, blue, red, and green. They were actually 4 phantoms of Chi-Yu, but the color was different from Chi-Yu's. Even Chi-Yu himself did not expect that such a situation would occur. The 4 phantoms' feet turned illusory in the air. Their bodies arched backward, and their right arms retracted behind their back. The 4 colors of energy flourished at the same time, especially the blue and purple figures. The 4 Kirin phantoms rushed toward the 4 patriarchs respectively. The Thundercloud Force went against Shi Tianlu's metal special ability, the Water Thundercloud Force went against Su Ziyuan's Fire special ability, the Fire Thundercloud Force went against Shen Zhuo's Wood special ability, and the Wind Thundercloud Force went against Luo Changxin's Water special ability. The conformation of the 4 Kirin phantoms was too astonishing. The 4 patriarchs had just raised their abilities to attack, but the 4 Kirin phantoms had already arrived in front of them. Meanwhile, Chi-Yu's original black figure had already disappeared at the same time the 4 Kirin phantoms appeared. In the eyes of everyone present, the one who had done well was naturally Hai Ryue. Only she, relying on her eyesight, which had been enhanced by the second stage of origin attribute mutation, could vaguely see that those were not 4 Kirin, but rather Chi-Yu himself. The so-called 4 phantoms were illusions that were produced because of his excessively fast speed. Hai Ryue did not dare to confirm whether these 4 phantoms were real or just 3 illusions and one was real. Reality answered Hai Ryue's question. Boom, 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 boom. 4 loud quakes rang out at the same time. Ghost's worry seemed to have experienced a special storm. The 4 types of energy cancelled each other out and exploded. With the point where Chi-Yu and the 4 patriarchs were attacking each other as the center, the 5 phantoms merged and then separated. The bodies of the 4 patriarchs were shaken and forced to take a step back at the same time. More than half of the energy they had accumulated earlier had been dispersed, and their originally abnormally strong aura immediately weakened. Meanwhile, Chi-Yu's body somersaulted 3 times in the air and landed on the Zodiac guardian god's side. Amidst the flashing light, the light from the Kirin pearl on Chi-Yu's chest clearly weakened. Chi-Yu's face looked a little pale, and the black Kirin armor on his body emitted a layer of ink-like black light. Chi-Yu's chest heaved up and down slightly, and his right arm was slightly trembling. The huge Ghost's Worry stone tablet had disappeared into thin air. The entire peak of Ghost's Worry Peak, with the place where the 5 clashed as the center, within an area of about 100 square meters, the ground had sunk by half a meter. Where it had sunk, the rocks on the ground had become abnormally smooth, as if they had been cut by a knife. Chi-Yu's deep black eyes flickered, and he let out a low roar. After this attack, not only did his aura not weaken, but it had also become stronger. The huge Kirin phantom had unknowingly appeared behind him, and the powerful aura faintly carried a counterattack. The Zodiac Guardian God warriors led by Hai Ryue were completely shocked by this attack. At least on the surface, it seemed that both sides were evenly matched. This was 1 against 4. Even when Hai Ryue had fought against one of the patriarchs, it had not been easy for her to win. However, Chi-Yu had actually defeated the 4 patriarchs by himself. This situation was not only unimaginable for the four major clans, but also for the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. After all, no one had seen Kirin's strength, whether it was in the past or now. This was also the first time that Kirin's original appearance had changed. The eyes of the four patriarchs were filled with shock. Except for the patriarch of the Northwest Luo family, Luo Changxin, who did not feel anything, the other three patriarchs were extremely uncomfortable at this moment. Zhou Tianlu's body had already been completely paralyzed, and he was constantly urging the special ability in his body to recover. The flames emitting from Su Ziyuan's body had also clearly weakened. Qi Yu's strongest abilities were the lightning and water abilities. Although the four abilities were scattered to attack the four patriarchs, the four cloud rank Kirin's ability represented an extremely powerful attribute. The special abilities of the two patriarchs had received a strong blow. Although their bodies were still stable, the aura in their bodies was constantly trembling. The most unlucky person would probably be Shenjua. Facing the fire thundercloud force, Shenjua's would attribute special ability had been completely suppressed. The clothes on his body had already started to emit a faint burnt smell. The wood attribute thundercloud force in his body was constantly shrinking, and waves of heat were continuously transmitted into his body. The four patriarchs were doing their utmost to recover their special abilities. In their opinion, Qi Yu would need a longer time to recover after receiving an attack from four people at the same time. However, Qi Yu had once again brought them a new shock. However, after he landed on the ground, he retreated 7 or 8 steps before stabilizing his body. After pausing for a short second, he once again rushed out. Kirin's illusion steps perplexing track. Qi Yu moved again. This time, there weren't 4 Kirin phantoms but countless Qi Yus. The black shadows overlapped one another, and within the black shadows, an unusually low and deep roar spread out in all directions. A brilliance that was like a silver dragon erupted from the black shadows, and a silver cold lightning shot straight towards Luo Changxin, who was at the rightmost side. Chapter 54. Zhou Tianlu's metallized body shot out like a cannonball towards the countless Kirin figures that Qi Yu had created. Su Ziyuan released 2 fire dragons from his hands, which coiled around the 2 sides and surrounded all the black shadows. Under the effect of the 2 fire dragons, the area that the black shadows had created shrunk greatly. Shenjua did not attack. His body floated backwards, and immediately after, he spat out a mouthful of blood. 9 green arrow lights surged out from his arms, legs, head, chest, and abdomen at the same time, and flew into the air. Luo Zhangxin suddenly felt as if he could not breathe, and a terrifying and enormous pressure rushed towards him. Under the effect of the pressure, he gave up on attacking, and retreated half a step to the right. His palms made a pushing gesture, and he shouted, "Ice freezing technique." The blue light turned white, and a layer of ice that was a foot thick completely protected his body. That was not ordinary ice, but was completely condensed from water attribute energy, and its hardness was far greater than that of steel. It was unknown whether it was because of the fire dragon's attack, or because Qi Yu's energy was insufficient, but the large number of black shadows that had been created suddenly disappeared. At the same time, the space instantly distorted for a moment. Although it was only for a short thousandth of a second, the situation had completely changed. The attack that should have appeared in front of Luo Zhangxin suddenly disappeared, and a huge ball of silver light suddenly appeared in front of Su Ziyuan, who was controlling the 2 fire dragons to attack from the center. It seemed to be a huge fist that was condensed from energy. Within the silver light there were black threads. This was Kirin's most original energy, the energy that came from his bloodline. Kirin's arm, Skybreaker. Lin. Su Ziyuan was indeed worthy of being the Su family's patriarch. In such a critical situation, in front of the powerful Kirin's arm, he actually forcibly withdrew the 2 fire dragons that he had released, and condensed them into a ball of fire to forcibly collide with Qi Yu's Kirin's arm. The silver light stopped in front of the ball of fire, and the fire energy that erupted from Su Zhuan's palms was quickly reduced. His face revealed an intense expression of pain, but he had, after all, withstood it for the time being. He did not need to defeat Qiyu, and it was even more impossible for him to win against Kirin's arm. What he needed now was to wait for the other 3 patriarchs to come to his rescue. Therefore, he only needed to resist for a short period of time. Unfortunately, Qiyu would not give him such a chance. Bing! The silver light suddenly increased, and Su Zhuan screamed. His body was instantly sent flying, and sparks scattered everywhere. Blood gushed out of his mouth, and his body was sent flying backward. In the past, it would be very difficult for Qiyu's body to grasp this opportunity. Zhuan's body, and Zhuan's qi would be. Life Zhuan's qi was qi and qi life. Zhuan the yam and qi. As Zhuan's zids and said. As Kir's Zhi's qi from the Zhi's. As Bai and Ziwa's Jiang's pings as Ziaf all. Said. Who was. And Kair of Chen as of Kirin Bai. Hai Lin. Of Qi Yu and said, of comma, and of Yen and Qi said and had. In the last stage of the battle, his combat experience was completely cultivated under the threat of death. The moment Su Zhuan was sent flying, Qi Yu's body instantly retreated, leaving an afterimage. The other 3 family heads' abilities exploded where he was standing, but they could only destroy the afterimage. Qi Yu retreated and advanced again. At the same time, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and the silver light expanded again. Fighting! The silver and black light on Kirin's arm was surrounded by the 4-colored thundercloud force. Qiyu's body seemed to be flying. He moved forward and punched 3 times in a row. The 3 family heads, who had been weakened by the attack just now, were forced to retreat 5 meters away. Qiyu was also sent flying by the 3 family heads' joint attack. At the cost of being injured, he interrupted the 3 lords' continuous attacks. It was true that Qiyu had been injured in just 2 short exchanges, but one of the 4 clan leaders had already lost the ability to fight, while the other 2 had suffered varying degrees of injuries. To be able to achieve such a result with his own strength was undoubtedly a miracle. However, it was not over yet. While Qiyu was blocking the 3 family heads' pursuit, the Kirin phantom behind him disappeared along with his body. It was Kirin's invisibility. The 3 family heads looked at each other, and they saw the shock in each other's eyes. As the leaders of the 4 great families of the Guardian of the East, they had always had their eyes on the top of their head. Although they knew about the strength of the Zodiac guardian gods from their family history, they never imagined that a single Zodiac guardian god, and the weakest Qilin in the legends, would possess the strength to contend against the 4 of them. At this moment, they had no choice but to place Qiyu on the same level as the 4 of them. The smart Ji Mingming shouted, "It's already been 2 attacks, there's still one last attack." The 3 family head spirits were roused. It was the last attack, and it represented the honor of the 4 families. The 3 of them approached each other without any hesitation, and their backs were facing each other, forming a triangle. Zhou Tianlu and Luo Changxin subconsciously protected Shenjua, who was more seriously injured. Shenjua's body was constantly releasing green light, and the 9 green lights that he had released earlier were hovering above the 3 people's heads. Zhou Tianlu pointed his right hand towards the sky, and the 9 green lights released by Shenjua were immediately controlled by him. Just like the 9 longswords at the beginning, they revolved around the 3 people's bodies, and almost sealed off all possible angles of attack. The 3 family heads released their spiritual power at the same time, and probed Qiyu's aura. Qiyu quickly retreated to a corner while he was invisible, and gasped for breath. Although he had only exchanged blows twice, under the pressure of the 4 family heads, his 4 types of energy had been greatly weakened, and the qi and blood in his body were constantly surging. Especially the last attack just now, it had seriously injured his body, but the strongest Kirin's arm was slightly trembling uncontrollably at this moment. The current situation was very delicate. Although Chi-Yu was doing his best to recover the thundercloud force that he had used, the three family heads' minds had also gradually calmed down. Under Zhou Tianlu's control, the longswords formed by the green wood attribute energy began to expand outwards to search for Chi-Yu. Being invisible didn't mean that he didn't exist. Once he was touched by any one of these 9 energy swords, Chi-Yu would definitely be locked onto by them. Chi-Yu quickly determined what he should do now. His body lightly leaped and rose into the air. Under the effect of the wind, his body floated up, and the 4-colored auspicious clouds supported his body in an invisible state. He slowly flew towards the top of the 4 family heads. Although he was afraid of heights, he could still endure being a few meters away from the ground. The thundercloud force in his body quickly surged towards his right arm while he was flying, and Chi-Yu could clearly see that his right arm was continuously flickering with a silver-black radiance. The Kirin's blood vessels in his body surged unceasingly. His body slightly turned, and his right palm quickly slapped downwards 3 times. When he had slapped the first palm, because he had used the thundercloud force to attack, his figure had already been revealed. The 3 family heads raised their heads at the same time, and saw 9 green lights rolling towards Chi-Yu almost without any pause. A purple electric light appeared on top of Zhou Tianlu's head, while a blue light smashed towards a huge water ball towards Luo Changxin. Under the effect of the blue sea thunder pearl, Chi-Yu's 2 strongest abilities were lightning and water. Released by Kirin's arm, these 2 abilities were unleashed to their limit. Zhou Tianlu bellowed furiously. Although his metallized body couldn't block lightning, his non-conductive wood attribute energy could. The 9 sword lights retracted at the same time, and forcibly blocked Chi-Yu's attack on him. However, Chi-Yu managed to block it this time, but he still felt slightly numb. It was water against water. Because Chi-Yu had to split his attention, and his strength was also damaged, Luo Changxin clearly had the upper hand. 2 balls of blue light burst forth, and the water thundercloud force released by Chi-Yu was completely annihilated. The blue light released by Luo Changxin soared into the sky, but right at this moment, Chi-Yu stepped on Kirin's arm in midair, and slid out like a swimming fish. The black scales instantly turned fiery red, and even the Kirin's arm wasn't spared. The red rhombus-shaped scales on Chi-Yu's forehead instantly shone brightly. Kirin's red had displayed its might, and Chi-Yu looked as if he wanted to commit suicide. He opened his arms, and instantly flashed to the front of Shunzhua to hug him. Because Shunzhua had suffered injuries when fighting with Chi-Yu earlier, and because he had released 9 solid wood attribute energy to support Luo Changxin, he now had less than 30% of his energy remaining. Seeing Chi-Yu pouncing towards him, he couldn't help but be overwhelmed with shock. He subconsciously released a palm of wood attribute energy, and his body retreated at the fastest speed possible. However, how could he know that this was what Chi-Yu wanted him to do? A gap appeared in the perfect triangular formation because of Shunzhua's sudden retreat, and Chi-Yu's body directly replaced Shunzhua's position. His left hand carried the lightning and water energies, and his right hand carried the tyrannical might of Kirin's arm. He changed the direction, and directly blasted towards Zhou Changlu and Luo Changxin. The green light, the blue water light, the purple lightning light, and the tyrannical black and silver Kirin's arm completely collided at this moment. The air fell into silence. At the center where these surging energies intersected, a vortex seemed to have appeared. The vortex rapidly swallowed all the energy, bringing everything into a state of tranquility. Shunzhua, who had retreated far away, looked at the battlefield in shock and uncertainty. Chi-Yu, Zhou Tianlu, and Luo Changxin were all quietly standing there, and their bodies were no longer emitting any light. The Kirin armor and Kirin scarlet on Chi-Yu's body gradually faded away, and on his body there were 9 wounds of different depths, with blood slowly flowing out. Although Kirin Scarlet and Kirin Armor had resisted Luo Changshin's water attribute ability, in the end, they were still injured by Zhou Tianlu using Shen Zhuo's wooden sword because of the energy throw. However, seeing the scene in front of him, Shen Zhuo's heart sank. The bet between the two parties was based on whether Qi Yu could withstand 3 attacks from the 4 patriarchs. At this moment, although blood was flowing out of Qi Yu's body, he was still standing there. He had won. Under the siege of the 4 patriarchs, he had persevered. Moreover, in the 3 attacks, he had not been forced into a disadvantageous position. The metal armor on Zhou Tianlu's body seemed to disappear at the same time as the Kirin armor on Qi Yu's body. His complexion changed, but he still couldn't hold back and spit out a mouthful of blood. His body swayed slightly, and he barely managed to stand firm. Qi Yu's gaze was as firm as his body. He didn't say anything, and only stared fixedly at the 2 people in front of him. Luo Changshin let out a long sigh and said with difficulty, "We lost." Qi Yu nodded. Just as he was about to open his mouth to say something, he spat out an arrow of blood. His body swayed, and he took half a step back before he could stand firm. A trace of a smile appeared on his face, and he shook off the blood stain at the corner of his mouth. He didn't care about the injuries on his body and said, "Since Patriarch Luo has admitted defeat, then, I ask the 4 great clans to fulfill their promise. If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose." Zhou Tianlu helplessly shook his head. Until now, the numbness in his body hadn't completely disappeared. He sighed lightly and said, "The Zodiac Guardian God is, after all, the strongest guardian of the East. I didn't expect that under such circumstances, you guys would still be able to win. Even if there were 10 matches today, I'm afraid we still wouldn't be able to win." Shen Zhuo lowered his head and walked to the side of the 2 patriarchs and said with a bitter smile, "It's all my fault. If it wasn't because I was greedy for life and afraid of death, we might not have lost." Luo Changshin indifferently said, "Brother Shen, you don't have to be like this. In that kind of situation, if it was me, I would also have done the same. I'm afraid none of us could withstand that kind of hug. The Zodiac King is not only powerful, but also impeccable in terms of tactic. For such a strong person to become the leader of our Eastern Guardian, I think." Just as he spoke up to hear, he was suddenly interrupted by a voice. "No, how can we, the 4 great clans, listen to such a little hooligan's orders?" The one who spoke was Shen Zhuo's son, Shen Yu. He was also Shen Yun's father. He strode out from the crowd of Shen clan, his eyes flickering with excitement and anger. "Father, 2 patriarchs, today we have the advantage. They only have these few people. As long as the elites of the 4 great clans attack with all their strength, they won't be able to resist." Shen Zhuo frowned, his eyes slightly flickered, but he didn't say anything. At this time, Hai Ryue had already rushed to Qi Yu's side with the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Ming Ming was somewhat flustered, and she continuously tapped on Qi Yu's body a few times, sealing the wounds on his body. Hearing Shen Yu's words, Qi Yu couldn't help but coldly snort. Could it be that the 4 great clans want to go back on their words? Su Zhiyuan, who had previously been sent flying by Qi Yu's full-strength attack, had already walked over with the support of his clansmen. His expression was very ugly and very gloomy. "The promise that our Su clan made will never change. Since we lost, we lost. From now on, the Su clan will become the subordinates of the Zodiac Guardian God warriors." As he spoke, he didn't even look at the other 3 patriarchs, and actually knelt towards the east. The Su clan members who came with him also followed him and knelt down. Su Zhiyuan looked towards the east, and his eyes revealed a trace of pain. In a clear voice, he said, "I, Su clan's 31st generation patriarch, Su Zhiyuan, hereby apologize to my compatriots who died because of the 4 great clans." As he spoke, he didn't hesitate to lead his clansmen to kowtow 3 times. The other 3 elders looked at each other in dismay. Of course, they weren't willing, otherwise, they wouldn't have come to this so-called exchange meeting. However, things had already developed to this point, and they were somewhat at a loss. At this moment, Shin Yu suddenly moved, and a dark purple spike pierced towards Chi Yu's body from the side without warning. In his eyes, Chi Yu was the leader of the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. Only by getting rid of him could they save the current situation. Chi Yu was already a Three Clouds Kirin. If it was under normal circumstances, he wouldn't be afraid of Shin Yu's attack at all. Even if he only relied on the mutated Kirin armor or Kirin Red, he would still be able to withstand this attack. However, he couldn't do it now. He had just fought with the 4 patriarchs, and his thundercloud force was already on the verge of collapse. A large amount of blood had caused his consciousness to become a little fuzzy, and his reactions were also a lot slower. If it wasn't for his strong willpower supporting his body, he was afraid that he would have already fallen. Everyone noticed Shin Yu's action. Shenzhua, Zhou Tianlu, and Luo Changxin shouted at the same time, "No!" Although they weren't willing to become the subordinates of the Zodiac Guardian God, they certainly knew that they couldn't really kill any of the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Unfortunately, Shin Yu had already quietly arrived beside Chi Yu before he made his move. He didn't hesitate to stab, and the sharp spike shot out from his hand like a purple lightning. At this time, the Zodiac Guardian God warriors were on the other side of Chi Yu. Although they felt that something was wrong, it was already too late. "Don't!" The one closest to Chi Yu was Ming Ming, so she was also the one with the most acute senses. With a scream, she fiercely pulled Chi Yu, causing Chi Yu's body to stagger. His own body quickly turned around and used his back to block the purple sharpness. Chi Yu's fuzzy consciousness instantly sobered up, and he roared, "No!" He clearly saw a purple spike protruding from the right side of Ming Ming's chest, and the fresh blood dyed the bright feathers of Ming Ming. Ming Ming's expression was very calm. She looked at Chi Yu, and the corner of her mouth unexpectedly revealed a trace of a satisfied smile. Fear, an intense fear attacked Chi Yu's heart. He suddenly realized how important Ming Ming was to him. A raging flame instantly erupted from Chi Yu's eyes, and the thundercloud force that was originally consumed seemed to have recovered. His body instantly moved horizontally, and the edge of his powerful right hand flickered with a silver luster as he heavily slashed at the spike on Ming Ming's back. As if there was no obstruction, the edge of his palm swept past the spike, and Chi Yu's delicate body was tightly embraced by Ming Ming. Incomparably angry roars came from every Zodiac Guardian God warrior, and Hai Ryua rushed towards Shin Yu like a cannonball. The powerful dragon fist was already swung out. All of a sudden, a big hand that was flickering with a silver-black light grabbed her fist, and actually pulled the T-Rex out of the BD. Ming Ming's delicate body carefully fell into Hai Ryua's embrace. Chi Yu's body changed, and his eyes changed from the original black to black and silver. His messy long hair covered his face, and a cold voice that seemed to come from the underworld sounded, "He's mine." Chi Yu moved. He didn't move quickly, but his movements looked terrifying. Because, at this moment, although he didn't change his original appearance, his exposed skin was covered with silver and black patterns. An extremely strong aura diffused from those silver and black patterns, and filled the entire Guijian Cho Peak as if hiding the sky and covering the earth. Other than the Su family that had already walked down the mountain, all the elites of the other 3 big families were unexpectedly suffocated by this indescribable pressure. Raising his hand, he extended an index finger, and slowly swept it in front of his eyes. "Die, all of you must die. Hurting my woman, all of you must pay with your lives." Shenzhua regretted, Luo Changxin regretted, and Zhou Tianlu also regretted. Facing the aura that erupted from Chi Yu's body, only now did they realize that the Kirin in front of them was actually much more terrifying than they had imagined. They deeply hated themselves for not being as decisive as Su Ziyuan. Shen Yu was right in front of Chi Yu, and he was also the center of the extremely strong aura that Chi Yu emitted. Looking at the black and silver patterns on Chi Yu's body continuously moving towards his right arm like flowing water, he discovered that he, who had always thought of himself as powerful, was actually unable to move even his little finger. Quickly stop, Chi Yu, are you crazy? Xie Zhi's terrified voice sounded in Chi Yu's mind. Chi Yu was not crazy, on the contrary, he was very calm, but in this calmness, it was filled with monstrous hatred. In his eyes, every single person from the 3 big families in front of him was so disgusting. Big brother Xie Zhi, I am not crazy. You said that the ultimate Kirin arm cannot take away my life. Xie Zhi hurriedly said, even so, after using the ultimate Kirin arm, even if you are Ink Kirin, you will still need hundreds of years to recover. You are a human, can you live for hundreds of years? If you use the ultimate Kirin arm now, it is equivalent to crippling your own ability. Chi Yu roared madly in his heart, I don't care so much, can't you see that my woman is about to die? She blocked that stab for me, even if I die, I will take revenge for her. I will completely destroy all the enemies in front of me. Yes, at the moment when Ming Ming was pierced by the stab, Chi Yu's heart was already burning. Of course, it was impossible to recover the exhausted thundercloud force. He was not a god, even as an auspicious sign, he could not go against the laws of nature. If he wanted to take revenge for Ming Ming, then there was only one way, and that was Kirin's strongest ultimate skill, the ultimate Kirin arm. The existence of the ultimate Kirin arm was not only unknown to the 3 big families, but also to the Zodiac Guardian warriors. After all, after Kirin's blood was integrated into the human body, Kirin had never been strong, and no one knew this secret. However, Chi Yu was different. After all, he was a 19-year-old young man with the impulsiveness and courage of a young man. How could he remain calm when he saw Ming Ming blocking that stab for him? Therefore, the only thing on his mind was to kill all the culprits who caused everything to happen. Even a 10,000-year-old beast would not be willing to face the ultimate Qilin arm. Although the people before them were the elites of the 4 great clans, and 3 of them were clan leaders, facing a powerful attack that could only be used once in a Qilin's lifetime, their ending would be the same as Chi Yu had predicted. There was only one outcome, death. At this moment, a slim figure ran up from the foot of the mountain. Her movements were naturally not considered fast among the experts in front of him, and one could even hear her panting clearly. However, her appearance made Chi Yu, who was just about to unleash the ultimate power, slow down. Chi Yu, no, I beg you. The person who came knew that she could not run to Chi Yu in time to stop everything. As soon as she reached the top of the mountain, she knelt on the hard rock with a thud. The person who came was Shen Yun. Based on her ability, she was not qualified to participate in this exchange. Naturally, she knew that Chi Yu would come, so she left a listening device on her father's body and listened to everything that happened in Gui Jianchou from not far from the top of the mountain. When she heard that Chi Yu was going to kill her father, she immediately rushed out without hesitation, wanting to stop everything from happening. Chi Yu's eyes flickered, but the black and silver patterns on his body did not stop flowing. Give me a reason. Just because you are from the Shin family? Ming Ming is also your friend. For the sake of his family's interests, this man in front of me has already done something that I cannot forgive. Tears continuously flowed down Chen Yun's face as she spoke in a mournful manner. He is my father. Chi Yu's whole body trembled, and the light in his eyes instantly brightened, solidifying on Shen Yu's face. In his heart, Shen Yun was always the girl who treated him like a sister and gave him the warmth of a family. He never thought that the man in front of him, who he hated to the bone, would be Shen Yun's father. However, was this enough to change everything? For the sake of Chen Yun, could he not take revenge for Ming Ming? Chi Yu, do you want to save your little girlfriend? If you want to, stop immediately. Xie Zhi roared at Chi Yu for the first time. Hearing his voice, the black and silver patterns flowing on Chi Yu's body stopped. Kiran's arm was the most powerful attack in Kiran's life. Before it exploded, it could be controlled. Brother Xieji, Chiyu, listen to me. I have already felt the plant-based ability of the man in front of you. It contains the toxin of sepsis. In other words, the wound pierced by the spike cannot be healed. Now, only you can save Ming Ming. Only if you transfuse your blood to her, with the super healing ability of Kiran's blood, can you pull her back from the crisis. If you still want to save her, immediately give up using the ultimate Kiran's arm and take her to a place where the case is for blood transfusion. After listening to Xieji's words, Chi Yu's heart finally calmed down. He knew that even if he killed all these people in front of him, it would be impossible to make up for Ming Ming's life. He took a deep breath and barely calmed down the madness in his heart. He did not disperse the energy condensed by the ultimate Kiran's arm. He looked coldly at Xin Yu in front of him and said coldly, I will keep your life for the time being. I will not kill you today, not because your daughter is merciful to you. You'd better never let me see you again. The pressure suddenly relaxed. Xin Yu sat on the ground and gasped for breath. A shadow that could not be dissipated was constantly raging in his body. He could never forget the black and silver eyes in this life. He could never forget the fear that Chi Yu brought to him. Chi Yu turned his eyes to the three patriarchs. His hellish eyes swept across the faces of the three. He did not say much. His body retreated like lightning to Hai Ryue's side. He carefully took Ming Ming into his arms and said in a deep voice, I will leave this place to you. I will take Ming Ming to get treatment immediately. As he spoke, his feet touched the ground and his body soared into the air. With the support of the four-colored thundercloud force, he flew away at a high speed. No one noticed that Chi Yu had forgotten about his fear of height. As he flew rapidly in the air, the coldness on Chi Yu's face was replaced by anxiety. He used the energy he condensed to carefully protect Ming Ming, afraid that she would be blown away by the wind. Ming Ming, you have to hold on. I am here. As long as I am alive, I will not let you die. Ming Ming had fallen into a state of extreme weakness. He looked at Chi Yu in a daze. Chi Yu, how did you suddenly become so powerful? I am a little cold. Hold me tight. Chi Yu tightened his arms but did not dare to use too much force. He was afraid that he would touch the wound on Ming Ming's chest. He said softly, Don't talk anymore. When you are better, I will tell Nian Di in detail. Ming Ming, be good. Nothing must happen to you. You are so silly. Why did you block that attack for me? Ming Ming smiled. Her smile was very gentle. She forced her head to lean against Chi Yu's chest. Actually, I don't know either. Chi Yu, aren't we good friends? Am I supposed to leave you to die? A light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes. He shook his head hard and said, No, Ming Ming, we are no longer good friends. From now on, you are my girlfriend. You are my lover. I will never, ever allow anyone to take you away from me. Ming Ming was stunned. She asked in a strange tone, Just because I saved you? Her voice sounded a little weak. Although the flow of blood was slowed down because Hai Ryue had sealed her veins, the large amount of blood loss and the wound on her chest had pushed her to the brink of unconsciousness. Chi Yu lowered his head and kissed Ming Ming's head gently. Although it was not because you saved me, I suddenly understood how important you are to me at that moment. Ming Ming chuckled. What if I don't like you? You ruffian. Chi Yu said domineeringly. Even if you don't like me, I will pester you every day. I will even follow you when you go to the toilet until you agree. You are so annoying. How can you chase a girl like this? Ming Ming's pale face blushed. She forced her eyes open and looked at Chi Yu. She mumbled, But I like. She could not hold on any longer and fainted. Chapter 55. Chi Yu didn't bring Ming Ming back to the Dragon Field courtyard because it was in the east of the capital, and Tianxiang Mountain was in the west. Ming Ming's current condition required treatment as soon as possible. Every second delayed could lead to changes in her condition. Therefore, he directly returned to the basement where he originally lived in the Jingshan district. Although the environment was a little bad, it was one of the few quiet places that Chi Yu could find. When he first rented this place, no outsider would come for a month. Kicking open the locked door, Chi Yu didn't care about the dirty air in the room and carefully carried the unconscious Ming Ming to the bed. At this time, Ming Ming had become a naked beauty due to the gradual disappearance of her natural attribute mutation. However, Chi Yu wasn't in the mood to admire her incomparably beautiful body. He simply used thundercloud force to clear the air in the room and immediately locked the door. However, at this time, he was stunned because there was no blood transfusion tool here. How could he transfuse his blood to Ming Ming? The hesitation didn't last for too long. He thought of the most primitive method, which was also the safest. Ming Ming, what's mine is yours. You must survive. Hee, I guess I've stolen your first kiss. Come on, I've still made a profit. His nails weren't sharp, but the condensed wind blades were comparable to any sharp weapon. Chi Yu cut open his wrist and dripped the blood into his mouth. He was afraid that the Kirin blood in his body wasn't pure enough. He deliberately cut open his right hand. The taste of the blood was a little salty, with a faint fishy smell. Chi Yu couldn't help but feel a little funny. He never thought that he would taste his own blood one day. When the blood reached half his mouth, he lowered his head and kissed Ming Ming's cherry lips, carefully passing the blood over. After crossing 5 times in a row, Chi Yu started to feel a little dizzy. He knew that this was not the time for him to faint. He had to disperse the power of the ultimate Kirin arm. He first pulled out the spike from Ming Ming's chest. Then, he used the thundercloud force to seal his blood vessels. Every time he used his mouth to transfer blood to Ming Ming, in order not to waste it, he carefully placed his wrist on the wound on Ming Ming's chest. Kirin's self-healing ability was indeed very strong. When he made a cut, it would automatically heal before he could even drip half a mouthful of blood. Chi Yu could only make more cuts and drip more blood. And so on. When the thundercloud force dispersed, he had to disperse it because the surging power of the ultimate Kirin arm needed to find an outlet to explode. Chi Yu didn't know how much blood a human had. He also didn't consider the problem of losing too much blood. He kept repeating the simple yet complicated process without any pause. When he was in Ghost's worry, Chi Yu had already lost some blood because of the 9 wounds. Although the wounds had gradually healed after Ming Ming sealed his blood vessels. Coupled with his own injuries, even if he was Kirin, his body gradually couldn't support the continuous loss of blood through his wrist vessels. There was a flash of light, and a small snake with 9 heads appeared out of thin air. Idiot, do you think Kirin's blood is plain water? If you continue to lose, you'll be finished. The deep-sea nether snake swung its tail. It hit Chi Yu's head. Chi Yu was already an arrow at the end of its flight. The only reason he could hold on until now was because of his consciousness. Being whipped by him, her entire body trembled. Unable to hold on any longer, she fainted. Xieji, I despise you, deep-sea nether snake said to Chi Yu's body. Xieji's voice came from Chi Yu's body. Despise what? That spike isn't poisonous to Ming Ming, and it's not a vital point. We just need to send it to the human hospital. There would be no problem at all. You just had to mention the septicemia poison. Aren't you trying to kill that bastard Chi Yu? The deep-sea nether snake said angrily. Xieji chuckled. Oh, I couldn't tell. Since when did Senior Nether Snake care so much about Chi Yu? Nether Snake said angrily, nonsense. I am now bound to him for good or ill. How can I not care? Xieji said, in that situation, didn't you see how impulsive Chi Yu was? If I didn't say that, this kid would really dare to use the ultimate Kirin arm. At that time, it would be even more difficult to deal with. Although he lost a lot of blood now, judging from his potential that was stimulated some time ago, he definitely won't die. He will recover after a period of rest. Well, Senior Nether Snake, I am going to sleep. You guard them. Ming Ming, this girl, can be considered a blessing in disguise. With so much Kirin blood from Chi-Yu, it will be of great benefit to her future ability. Why me? Of course it's you. I don't have a physical body. How can I guard? I am just Chi-Yu's military advisor. What's more, you were so powerful in the past. Even a rotten ship has 3 nails. Hee, sleep. Nether Snake was speechless. After a long time, Ming Ming slowly woke up from her coma. Her whole body was warm and indescribably comfortable. A heat seemed to be constantly evaporating her body from the inside out. Opening her eyes, the scenery gradually became clear. She found herself in a spacious room, and the soft bed was abnormally comfortable. Her memory gradually recovered. Subconsciously, she touched her well-developed chest, and her hand touched a bright light. Ming Ming couldn't help but look down at her chest. The original wound was gone, and only a triangular light red mark remained. Ah, isn't this the Dragonfield courtyard? I am not dead. Chi-Yu, where did Chi-Yu go? When she thought about how she appeared naked in front of Chi-Yu after her original form changed, and what she said to him before she fainted, Ming Ming's face couldn't help but burn. The door opened, and Hai Ryue floated in from outside like the wind. As soon as she felt the change in Ming Ming's Zodiac chicken aura, she immediately rushed over. When Ming Ming saw Hai Ryue come in, she struggled to sit up. Although there was still a faint pain in her chest, it wasn't serious. Ming Ming, why are you up? Hai Ryue sat down on the bed beside Ming Ming. Ming Ming was surprised to find that the usually beautiful Ming Ming now looked a little more haggard. There was even a faint trace of sadness in her eyes. Sister Ryue, thank you for saving me. I am fine now. Ming Ming took a deep breath. The faint pain in her chest seemed to have lessened a lot. Hai Ryue pulled Ming Ming's hand and smiled. I am relieved that you are awake. You have been unconscious for 2 days and 2 nights. If it wasn't for the doctor telling me that your body is recovering at an unparalleled speed, I would have sent you to the hospital. Ming Ming smiled. A faint blush appeared on her face. Sister Ryue, where is Chi-Yu? I remember that I was with him before I fainted. How is he? Hearing Ming Ming's question, Hai Ryue's expression changed slightly. The gentleness in her eyes also became a lot dimmer. She forced a smile and said, he is fine. Because he has consumed too much energy, he is currently resting. It won't take long for him to recover. Don't worry about him for now. Rest well. When you are completely recovered, I will take you to see him. Ming Ming was slightly stunned. She looked at Hai Ryue with a trace of panic in her eyes. No, Sister Ryue, you are lying to me, right? Chi-Yu must have met with an accident. I am fine now. Take me to see him. Hai Ryue looked at Ming Ming's agitated expression and couldn't help but frown. She comforted her. Be good, Ming Ming. Listen to Sister Ryue and rest well. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if your injuries worsen. This time, you bravely used your body to block Chi-Yu's attack. You are truly a role model for us Zodiac Guardian warriors. Little E and the others worship you very much. Ming Ming looked at Hai Ryue's flickering eyes and her expression greatly changed. Sister Ryue, don't change the subject. Quickly tell me, what happened to Chi-Yu? He must have met with an accident. He was already injured when he saved me that day. Moreover, there are black and silver patterns on his body that I have never seen before. I beg you, don't hide it from me. What exactly happened? I'm really fine now. Just tell me. Hai Ryue's eyes revealed a struggling expression. She lightly sighed and said, You two are really silly. Even if I don't tell you now, you will know sooner or later. From the time you fainted until just now, you were unconscious for a total of 3 days and 2 nights. When we found you at Chi-Yu's former residence, the 2 of you were still unconscious. You have already woken up, but Chi-Yu is still unconscious. Moreover, his physical condition isn't very good. This time's Gui Jianchao's action really caused him great harm. Ming Ming grabbed Hai Ryue's hand. Her originally ruddy complexion instantly became a lot paler. Her eyes revealed an anxious light. Sister Ryue, how is he? Is his life in danger? Hai Ryue shook her head and said, I carefully used my dragon force to feel his aura. There is no danger to his life. However, I also don't know when he will wake up. That day, when we found the two of you, your entire body was naked because of your natural attribute mutation, and Chi Yu's upper body was also naked. The reason why you can recover so quickly probably has a lot to do with Chi Yu. Because, when we found the two of you, Chi Yu's right forearm was crisscrossed with dozens of wounds. It seemed to have been cut by a sharp weapon. And there was the same blood stain at the corner of his mouth and yours. That was Chi Yu's blood. If I guessed correctly, Chi Yu should have been afraid that you would lose too much blood, so he passed his blood to you mouth to mouth. Kirin's bloodline has an extremely strong recovery ability. It is precisely because of this that you can recover in such a short period of time after suffering such a serious injury. And the biggest reason why Chi Yu hasn't woken up yet is caused by a large amount of blood loss. Moreover, his thundercloud force has been greatly overdrawn. Coupled with the injuries that his body has suffered, it is difficult to combine the three into one. Hence, his condition is not very good. After listening to Hai Ryue's words, Ming Ming's gaze froze. Her hand holding Hai Ryue's obviously became cold and trembled slightly due to agitation. Chi Yu, why are you so stupid? Why? Recalling all the things that happened before she fainted, tears flowed down her face. Ming Ming suddenly threw herself into Hai Ryue's arms and cried bitterly. Hai Ryue gently stroked Ming Ming's soft short hair and said softly, Don't worry, Chi Yu is like a cockroach that can't be killed. After suffering such a serious injury, if it was someone else, they would have been dead long ago. However, the vitality contained in his body is still extremely strong. According to Su Dong, and I've used the Thundercloud Force to investigate, the reason why he is unconscious is mainly because of his body's self-protection. The blood he lost and the injuries he suffered need time to recover. Ming Ming suddenly raised her head and looked at Hai Rujuan with tears in her eyes. Sister Ryue, bring me to see him. I really want to see him now. Hai Ryue frowned slightly and said, Your body. Ming Ming sat up straight and said anxiously, I'm fine. Sister Ryue, I'm completely fine. I beg you, bring me. Hai Ryue sighed softly and the light in her eyes suddenly became much more complicated. All right then. As she spoke, she helped Ming Ming down from the bed. Ming Ming's body had indeed recovered a lot. Although she had lost a lot of blood, she had also received a lot from Chi Yu. After these 3 days and 2 nights of rest, most of her body's functions had recovered. At this moment, other than feeling a little dizzy, she did not feel any other discomfort. Chi Yu was arranged to stay in a room on the 3rd floor of the villa by Hai Ryue. Once she entered the room, Ming Ming was a little stunned. This was because she discovered that this room was actually Hai Ryue's own room. At the side of the room, there was a wide round bed and Chi Yu was lying in the middle of the bed. His face looked very pale and very quiet. In his unconscious state, he did not have the arrogance from before and did not have that naughty smile. His quiet face looked very harmonious, just like a child. Ming Ming looked at Hai Ryue and Hai Ryue was also looking at her. She said in a low voice, I'm afraid that there will be some changes to his body, so I let him stay here so that I can take care of him at any time. As she spoke, she pointed to the chaise lounge by the bed. Ming Ming walked to the bed step by step and sat down gently. Looking at Chi Yu on the bed, the gaze in her eyes became unusually gentle. Hai Ryue sighed in her heart and said softly, Keep him company, but don't stay for too long. I'll go out first. As Hai Ryue left, the door silently closed. From the moment Ming Ming sat on the bed, her gaze never left Chi Yu's face. She carefully lifted the quilt and revealed Chi Yu's right arm. It was the unparalleled arm of Kirin, the arm of Kirin that could break the heavens. However, on the sturdy forearm, faint red marks were left. The marks were deep and shallow. It could be seen that when these marks were made, Chi Yu's body was already very weak. Dozens of red marks covered almost every inch of skin on Chi Yu's right forearm. Boiling hot tears dripped onto her arm that was densely covered with red marks. She bent down and gently pressed her fair and tender face against the mottled marks. She knew that she would never forget what she saw in front of her eyes for the rest of her life. But, Chi Yu, can I really repay you for this? Thinking about the day that was coming soon, Ming Ming couldn't help but cry even more. Time passed day by day. Half a month later, Chi Yu still showed no signs of waking up. However, the Zodiac Guardian God warriors weren't worried. Although Chi Yu hadn't woken up yet, his bodily functions were recovering at an astonishing speed. Ink Kirin's recovery ability was fully displayed after the special training in the Taklamakan Desert. Ever since the end of the exchange meeting, the one who changed the most was probably Yan Xiaoi. His originally jumpy personality was much more restrained. Under the guidance of Hai Ryue and the others, he cultivated much harder than before. Vol, Guan Ping, and Modi all returned to their previous lives. Su Dong also continued to be his teacher at Qingbei University. Taking care of Chi Yu was left to Ming Ming and Hai Ryu. She sat cross-legged on the side of the bed, and the thundercloud force in her body was constantly circulating. Ming Ming's body emitted a dazzling five-colored light. The thundercloud force in her body was constantly surging. Every time it moved, it would give her a new feeling. The various abilities of the Chicken Zodiac warrior kept flashing through her mind. Although her aura was restrained, she could still clearly feel that the thundercloud force had been greatly strengthened. Ever since she woke up, it didn't take long for Ming Ming's body to recover. Even the marks on her chest were constantly disappearing. Moreover, the Kirin bloodline didn't just give her the recovery ability. At the same time, there were many other benefits. The cultivation of the thundercloud force had been greatly strengthened. Ming Ming could clearly feel that her body seemed to be changing every day, and the speed of the change was very fast. There was a scorching energy in her body that was constantly spreading to her limbs and bones. In this process, her body and the thundercloud force were greatly affected. In just half a month, she had calmly reached the fourth cloud realm that she had been unable to break through despite her continuous efforts. The thundercloud force was restrained. A simple cloud circle had been completed. Ming Ming only felt refreshed. The five-colored light around her body slowly retracted into her body. Every pore became abnormally comfortable. She opened her eyes. Chi Yu was still lying there calmly. His face had become much rosier, and his aura had become much stronger. However, he still didn't wake up. Carefully pulling the quilt for him, Ming Ming said softly, "Wake up quickly. Everyone is looking forward to you waking up. Do you know? That day at Gui Jianchou, it was because of your final deterrence. The other three families have also surrendered to our Zodiac Guardian God. We have finally become the leaders of the Eastern Guardian again." Master Zagru was very happy when he knew about this. If it wasn't for the ceremony he was holding, he would have come to see you personally. Wake up quickly. I have been waiting for you. As long as you can wake up, I. Speaking of this, Ming Ming's pretty face couldn't help but blush slightly, but her expression was a lot gloomier. There were a few soft knocks on the door. The door opened, and a tall figure walked in from the outside. It was none other than Ming Ming's only brother, Jida. After Chi Yu came back, Jida knew about it. Everything that happened to Chi Yu in Taklamakan was also reported to General Ji in the capital. After knowing everything that happened to Chi Yu, Jida admired his master even more. After all, among the people that Jida knew, Chi Yu was the first person to pass all 3 stages of the test. This time, the reason why he fell into a deep coma was because he wanted to save his only sister. "Brother, you're here." Jida walked to Ming Ming's side, pulled a chair over and sat down. He looked at Chi Yu and asked, "How is Master? Is there any sign of him waking up?" Ming Ming shook her head and said, "Sister Ruiz said that his body's functions have almost recovered, but I don't know why he hasn't woken up. Perhaps he still needs some time." Jida sighed and said, Ming Ming, when you have time, go home and see father. I know that what master did this time must have touched you, but you should understand that it's impossible for the two of you to be together. You have an engagement if… Ming Ming interrupted Jida and looked at him coldly. She said, Brother, you don't have to say any more. I know what I have to do, and I haven't forgotten my responsibilities. I will deal with the matter between me and Chiyu. Don't we still have more than a year? Jida smiled bitterly and said, Silly sister, I just don't want you to sink too deep. You should understand what I mean. Ming Ming nodded and her eyes fell on Chiyu's face. Like a wife, she gently pulled the quilt for him again. Brother, when Chiyu wakes up, don't mention this in front of him. In fact, you worry too much. Chiyu is Kirin, and Kirin is a romantic. He can't put all his feelings on me alone. Can't you see that Sister Ryua actually has feelings for Chiyu? Although she tries to hide it, I am also a woman. How can I not feel it? So, you don't have to worry about anything. I am already an adult, and I know how to deal with my own matters. I just want to leave a lasting and beautiful memory before I leave my motherland. Jida turned around and looked at his sister deeply. All right, I will hide it from father for you, but you have to remember. You have to know your limits. I'm leaving. If master wakes up, you have to inform me. Ming Ming sent Jida out of the room and slowly closed the door. Her originally strong eyes suddenly became a lot dimmer. She thought to herself, Ming Ming, Ming Ming, why did you agree to that kind of marriage in the first place? In this situation, can you still forget about Chiyu and marry to the west? Greece. Although it is a place with a beautiful legend, the Aegean is also the beautiful scenery that you want to see the most, but how can all these compare to the ruffian in front of you? A soft hum came from the bed, waking Ming Ming from her thoughts. Her figure flashed and she was already by the bed. Chiyu frowned slightly. As if enduring some pain, the muscles on his face twitched, and he struggled to slowly open his eyes. Chiyu, you're awake. Ming Ming hurriedly held his big hand tightly. When he opened his eyes, Chiyu's eyes looked a little empty. When he saw Ming Ming's pretty face, there was a little more spirit in his eyes. Ah, Ming Ming, are you okay? Tears flowed uncontrollably from Ming Ming's eyes. After waiting for half a month, he finally woke up. I'm fine, I've been fine for a long time. Chiyu, you scared me to death. How could you give me so much of your blood? Chiyu forced a smile. His breath still seemed a little weak. As long as you're okay, it's fine. Humans have the ability to produce blood. Isn't it better for the body to have some fresh blood? Ming Ming angrily pinched his hand and said, You're so annoying. You're still joking at a time like this. Chiyu smiled and said, I don't care when. I only know that now is the best time, Ming Ming. Don't you think I'm very pitiful? Ming Ming was stunned. She looked at Chiyu, whose face had become a little rosier, and asked curiously, Why do you say that? Chiyu pretended to be pitiful and said, If you think I'm pitiful, can you agree to be my girlfriend? Ming Ming's pretty face turned red, and she angrily poked his head. You've just woken up and you want to do bad things. Just based on this, I don't think you're pitiful. The color on Chiyu's face suddenly increased, and there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. Ming Ming, in fact, I know that I can't make it. Because of the excessive use of energy, my heart was strongly stimulated. This time I woke up, it's just the final radiance of the setting sun. I just want to hear you promise me before I die. Ming Ming was shocked and exclaimed, Chiyu, no, how could this be? Seeing the color on Chiyu's face gradually disappear, Ming Ming was so scared that she couldn't speak. However, she didn't see the trace of slyness in the depths of Chiyu's eyes. Ming, promise me, okay? Even if you pity me, let me go with satisfaction. Chiyu, I promise you, not because I'm pitiful. Chiyu, don't die. As long as you're alive, I'll promise you anything. Ming Ming was completely panicked. Seeing that Chi Yu's face was gradually turning gray, her voice had already begun to tremble, and she spoke incoherently. She had never felt such a sense of fear that constantly stimulated her heart. Chi Yu sighed in his heart. In fact, when Jida came earlier, he had already woken up and heard the conversation between Jida and Ming Ming. He was very clear that as the daughter of General Ji, Ming Ming had a strong sense of responsibility for the country. If he forced her to stay in the future, he was afraid that it would be difficult for him to succeed. Only by foreshadowing now, and through his own efforts, could it be possible for Ming Ming to stay by his side forever. He wasn't afraid of the Western Guardian. What he was most afraid of was Ming Ming secretly leaving him for the benefit of the country. Therefore, he suppressed the pity in his heart and decided to carry out the plan. Ming Ming, do you really promise me? Chi Yu said with difficulty. Ming Ming sobbed and said, Chi Yu, you be *starred, you're not allowed to die. Do you hear me? You're not allowed to die. As long as you don't die, I'll promise you anything. Don't die, don't die. Ming Ming shook her head vigorously, and her tears continuously fell on Chi Yu. Seeing her so sad, Chi Yu couldn't help but feel pain in his heart. At this moment, an idea flashed in his mind. He had already thought of the best way to solve the problem in front of him. He pretended to take a deep breath. Ming Ming, do you really not want me to die? Then, there's only one way now. Tell me, hurry up and tell me. No matter what, as long as I can save you, I'm willing to do it. Do I need to transfuse blood to you again? I'll do it now. As she spoke, she had already raised her left hand, and a 5-colored light instantly flashed like a knife's edge. Chi Yu was shocked and quickly said, No, not transfuse blood. Transfusing blood is useless to me now. My body is fine under the effect of Kiran's blood, but my heart has suffered a huge injury. There's only one way for me to live now, and that is to need another person with Kiran's blood to connect with my heart. Using his heart to connect with mine, I can use his heartbeat to stimulate my own heartbeat. Only then can I barely survive. Another person with Kiran's blood? But aren't you the only Kiran? Ming Ming's mind was not very clear due to her anxiety. Chi Yu's breath seemed to be getting weaker and weaker. No, Ming Ming, have you forgotten? Your body already has my blood if… Hearing this, Ming Ming immediately woke up and said anxiously, Can I? Then hurry up and tell me what to do. Chi Yu barely restrained the surging emotions in his heart. Ming Ming, listen to me. If you use this method, it will be very restrictive for you because there's a certain distance between our hearts. You can't be more than 50 kilometers away from me, or else once our hearts lose contact, my heart will immediately stop beating. Furthermore, after our hearts are connected, we have to reconnect with each other's hearts every once in a while. Stop talking, hurry up and tell me what to do. As long as I can save you, this is nothing. Ming Ming's pretty face had turned pale because of anxiety, and her tears were still flowing. Chi Yu, okay then, kiss me. Use your heart to feel mine. At this moment, Ming Ming seemed to have forgotten her shyness. She lowered her head and gave her soft and cold lips without any hesitation. 4 lips touched, and Chi Yu and Ming Ming's bodies trembled slightly at the same time. Although this was not their first kiss, it was the first time they kissed when they were completely awake. Chi Yu's heart was completely attracted by this sudden beauty. Ming Ming's lips were a little salty from her tears. Chi Yu stretched out his arm and carefully hugged her delicate body. Ming Ming closed her eyes. Suddenly, she felt a strong arm around her slender waist, and a warm feeling came instantly. Under the guidance of the strong arm, she had already entered the quilt and was in close contact with a hot body. Chapter 56. Ming Ming did not have any desire in her heart. She only wanted to save Chi Yu. Being held tightly by that burning hot body, Ming Ming instantly felt a wave of heat all over her body. She could clearly feel Chi Yu's heartbeat through their chests. In her opinion, this was the process of treatment. While sucking on Ming Ming's lips, Chi Yu's hands were not idle. His left hand was wrapped around Ming Ming's slender waist, while his right hand pulled Ming Ming's right hand and placed it on his left chest. With a thought in his mind, he quietly probed into Ming Ming's mind. Although Chi Yu, who had reached the Three Clouds realm, had not recovered his mental strength had greatly increased compared to before. He could clearly feel every slight fluctuation in Ming Ming's mental strength. When Ming Ming's cold little hand touched his firm chest, Chi Yu instantly felt a strong stimulation. Subconsciously, his right hand, which had just led Ming Ming, quietly climbed up to Ming Ming's left chest. Ming Ming's chest was far from as fiery as Hai Ryue's, but it was full of elasticity. It was just right for one hand to grasp. That warm and round chest, although separated by clothes, still made Chi Yu's blood boil. Ming Ming's heart trembled violently. This was the first time she was so close to a man. Naturally, it was also the first time a man had touched her forbidden area. Under Chi Yu's hot hand, she was like an injured little pigeon. She trembled continuously. If it was any other time, perhaps Ming Ming would have escaped long ago. However, in her mind, it was to save Chi Yu now. Therefore, under this strong stimulation, she could only endure it. However, a flame had already been quietly ignited in her heart. Chi Yu's heart was struggling. He knew that if he wanted to do it now, then there was a good chance that he could get Ming Ming's body. If that was the case, Ming Ming would have lost her virginity and naturally wouldn't be able to marry to Greece. Yes, getting Ming Ming under such circumstances was really unfair to her. No, I can't do that. Although he really wanted to get her, he couldn't use this method. He could only get her if Ming Ming was completely willing. At the thought of this, Chi Yu resisted the impulse in his heart. He took a deep breath and used his mental strength and thundercloud force to communicate with Ming Ming. Perhaps it was because of the existence of Kiran's bloodline. The communication between their breaths was very smooth. Under the effect of Chi Yu's thundercloud force, Ming Ming's own thundercloud force fluctuated with Chi Yu's. Chi Yu's 4 kinds of thundercloud force entered her body one by one, circulated around her meridians, and then returned to his body. In this way, Chi Yu's weak thundercloud force could be nourished by Ming Ming's thundercloud force. Meanwhile, Ming Ming's thundercloud force also became more condensed under the stimulation of Chi Yu's 4 completely different attributes of thundercloud force. After the end of a cloud cycle, the first thing that changed was their breathing. When Chi Yu exhaled, Ming Ming inhaled, and when Ming Ming exhaled, Chi Yu inhaled. As they inhaled and exhaled, their bodies gradually formed a larger cloud cycle. Their thundercloud force also entered each other's body, forming a wonderful cycle. This was a cultivation method that they stumbled upon unintentionally. Under the continuous operation of their homologous thundercloud force, Chi Yu and Ming Ming's nervous and excited hearts gradually calmed down. Even Chi Yu's restrained desire no longer wreaked havoc. A peaceful and vast aura circulated invisibly, and they gradually entered a wonderful state. In this state, as their consciousness gradually became blurred, they actually entered a meditative state like how they usually cultivated, caressing each other's breasts, their lips touching. This kind of cultivation method could be considered unprecedented since ancient times. After an unknown period of time, Ming Ming slowly woke up from the dream. Her and Chi Yu's lips were still touching, and the warm big hand on her chest was still there. The thundercloud force in her body had already turned into a breath of fresh air and was constantly circulating. The thundercloud force didn't seem to have improved much, but it felt like there were some changes compared to before. Ming Ming couldn't tell the specific changes now, but it was just a feeling. Their lips were touching, so they naturally couldn't breathe with their mouths. Because their noses were very close, they could clearly feel each other's breath. It was still like one inhaling and the other exhaling, and their heartbeats were also very rhythmically echoing each other. Pressing her right hand on Chi Yu's left chest, Ming Ming could clearly feel that Chi Yu's heartbeat was exactly the same as hers, without the slightest deviation. With joy in her heart, Ming Ming thought to herself, "It seems that I have succeeded, but what kind of method is this? It's too shameful. Fortunately, he is fine." What did he say? Can't I be 50 kilometers away from him in the future? If this is the case, then in the future, just as Ming Ming thought of this, Chi Yu also woke up because of Ming Ming's aura. With a slight movement, their lips gently separated. Perhaps because they kissed for too long, their lips were a little sticky, and when they separated, they couldn't help but feel a slight pain between their lips. "Chi Yu, are you better?" Ming Ming asked softly. When she asked this, she had already lowered her blushing face. Chi Yu was still hugging Ming Ming, and the big hand that was pressing on her chest couldn't help but grab. The feeling of full elasticity was too great. Being grabbed by him, Ming Ming couldn't help but moan, but she didn't dare to rashly pull away from Chi Yu's hand. Shyly, she jumped into his embrace, her right hand still pressed on Chi Yu's chest, but her left hand subconsciously hooked around his neck. "Ming Ming, I'm fine. Can you feel it? Our heartbeats are completely synchronized. From a certain point of view, from now on, we can be said to be sharing the same heart. You have to be responsible for me." Annoying. Ming Ming lightly punched his shoulder. Her heart was in a mess, but at this time, she was in Chi Yu's warm and safe embrace. She really didn't want to think too much, and just hoped to stay in his arms like this forever. To forget all the unpleasant things. "Chi Yu, do you like me?" Ming Ming murmured. "No, I don't like you." A trace of a smile appeared on Chi Yu's face. "What did you say?" Ming Ming raised her head, and the hand that was originally hugging Chi Yu's neck had moved to his ear. She grabbed it and looked up at him fiercely, but what she saw was Chi Yu's gentle gaze. "Silly girl, I love you. How can this be replaced by the word like?" Although he had no practical experience, Chi Yu's theoretical knowledge of picking up girls was incomparably rich. How could such a pure girl like Ming Ming be his opponent? Ming Ming blushed and let go of her hand. She wanted to punch this annoying ruffian a few more times, but when she thought that his body had not recovered, she couldn't do it no matter what. "Chi Yu, do you really love me? But why is it that every girl you look at has such a perverted gaze? When did you fall in love with me?" Chi Yu was stunned for a moment. He really didn't know how to answer Ming Ming's question. Even he himself didn't know when he fell in love with Ming Ming. As for looking at beautiful girls, this had already become a habit in his life. Of course, it was also a habit of too many men. Ming Ming gently shook her head and said, "All right, no need to say. I understand. Master Zagru once said that every generation of Kirin is synonymous with the word flirtatious. This is the ability that Kirin's bloodline gives you, and at the same time, it also gives you negative effects. I just hope that it's enough for you to have me in your heart. However, if you have other women in the future, you can't bully me, do you hear me?" Chi Yu looked at Ming Ming in shock and said blankly, "Do you mean to say that I can pick up girls in the future?" "Ming Ming, actually, I'm not as perverted as you think." Ming Ming laughed and said, "All right, don't you always say that men don't explain? Explaining is covering up. Let everything take its course. I won't force you to do anything. At the same time, I hope you won't force me to do anything, okay?" Chi Yu's heart tightened, but he quickly smiled. "Okay. Of course. I don't have any other requests, as long as you remember that I'm already yours. You have to be responsible for me. For the sake of our mutual hearts, you can't be more than 50 kilometers away from me." He could be completely sure of one thing, and that was that Ming Ming would never let him die. Although it felt a little despicable, for the sake of his future, Chi Yu had to make good use of this point. Ming Ming glared at him and said, "You really are a scoundrel." There was something in Chi Yu's eyes suddenly. "Ming Ming, actually, I know very well that whether in terms of appearance or identity, I'm not worthy of you. However, you also know that I'm a hooligan, a ruffian. When you stood in front of me and blocked that stab for me, I knew that I'm going to rely on you. Not for a day, not for a year, but for a lifetime, for a lifetime. Chi Yu's words were very firm. He moved his hand away from Ming Ming's chest and wrapped it around her alluring waist. He hugged her tightly, so that her delicate body was completely pressed against his. He lowered his head and stared into Ming Ming's eyes at a distance of less than 10 centimeters. Ming Ming lowered her head in avoidance and murmured, "It's because I blocked that stab for you that you know, of course you know it's not like that. You blocked that stab for me just to let me know that I'm in your heart. Since that's the case, if I still don't take action, then I'll be a fool. Ming Ming, I'll use my life to protect you, until the end of time. Promise me, okay? Be my woman." Chi Yu. Ming Ming raised her head, sparkling and translucent tears flashed in her eyes. She wrapped her hands around Chi Yu's neck and took the initiative to offer her soft lip. However, this time, her lips were burning hot. The tall figure slowly retreated from outside the door. She had already seen everything in the room through the crack of the door. She didn't go in, but silently retreated with a bit of loneliness in her eyes. 10 days later, a guest arrived at the Dragon Field courtyard. Great Master! With Chi Yu and Hai Ryue in the lead, the Zodiac Guardian God warriors respectfully greeted the young man in front of them. Their respect came from the bottom of their hearts, without the slightest bit of pretense. This was because the person standing in front of them was Heaven's guide Zaglu, who had inherited the power of Buddha for 10 lifetimes. Today, Zagru was wearing sportswear and a sports cap. He looked like a sunny youth, but the trace of gentleness in his eyes was still his original appearance. "I'm really sorry to disturb you all so suddenly. I wanted to come a few days ago, but I couldn't get away because of something. I knew I would be able to come today." "Chi Yu, are you all right?" Chi Yu smiled and walked in front of Zagru. He said with a smile on his face, "Do I look like I'm not all right?" "Master, you didn't come here just to see if I'm dead or not, did you?" Zagru smiled and said, "You're still the same. I heard that Ryue Shaw has reached Kirin 3 Cloud. Speaking of which, even I can't believe it." As he spoke, he stretched out his right hand and pinched Chi Yu's wrist with his thumb, middle finger and index finger. Chi Yu didn't dodge, but jokingly said, "Master, I don't like men touching me." Zagru didn't say anything. He just closed his eyes and silently felt something. A layer of Buddha Chi floated up, making the surrounding Zodiac Guardian warriors feel as if they were bathing in a spring breeze. After a while, Zagru opened his eyes and sighed, "Chi Yu, you didn't disappoint me. In less than a year, what you've done really amazed me. Kirin is really Kirin. I was worried that it would be difficult for you to integrate with the Zodiac Guardian warriors. But now it seems that my worries were unnecessary. From the time you found several Zodiac Guardian warriors to the time you defeated the 4 big families in Tianxiang Mountain, I think you have won the trust of your companions, haven't you?" Chi Yu shrugged and said, "I'm just doing what I want to do. Master, you don't want to stand outside all the time, do you?" Hai Ryue respectfully said, "Master, please come inside and rest with us." Zagru nodded, then pulled Chi Yu's hand and walked into the villa surrounded by the crowd. Everyone was seated in the hall, and Zagru was given the main seat. Sudong said, "Master, do you have something to tell us this time?" Zagru shook his head and said, "No, I'm just a heavenly Een. In fact, after Chi Yu XX, can't see, my mission has already been completed. You will only need my help when you encounter difficulties that you can't solve. This time, I came to see you, and I also have something to tell Chi Yu about the shoes." Heavenly Een and Kirin complemented each other. As Chi Yu's strength increased, the intimacy between him and Zagru became stronger. Hai Ryue said, "Master, do you want us to leave for a while?" Zagru smiled and shook his head, saying, "There is nothing that cannot be said to others. You are all companions, and will face many difficulties together in the future. Between companions, the first thing to be built is trust. Buddha said that all 5 are empty. You must first let go of the negative emotions in your heart, and then everything will become clear. Chi Yu. Yes, master, please speak. Chi Yu's smile immediately disappeared when he heard that Zagru was looking for him. Zagru smiled and said, "There are 3 reasons why I came to pick you. First, I hope you can hurry up and find the last 5 Zodiac warriors as soon as possible. Only when the 12 Zodiac warriors are gathered will you have the foundation to face everything." Chi Yu nodded and said, "I will. But master, I don't know how to find them." To be honest, finding Vol, Little E, Modi, and Guan Ping was just an expectation. Zagru said, "No, it's not as simple as luck. You are an auspicious sign from heaven. When you appear, you will naturally attract the rest of the Zodiac warriors. What you need to do is to improve your ability to find them." Chi Yu nodded and said, "I understand, I will pay attention. What about the other 2? Zagru smiled faintly and said, his smile is a bit strange. "The second one is mainly about you. You are naturally free and easy. As your strength increases, the attractiveness you emit will become stronger. This will inevitably attract the attention of girls. Kiran is a playboy. But there is one thing I must rely on you. Before you had 4 female confidants. You must maintain your virginity." Yan Xiaoi had just drunk a mouthful of water. Hearing Zagru's words, he couldn't help but spit out the water and wet the ground. He coughed loudly and looked at Chi Yu with a strange look. Su Dong opened his mouth wide and said, "Boss, are you serious? You are still a virgin? I thought only Vol was a virgin. I thought you were a slut, but you are so pure." Next to Su Dong, Guan Ping shyly lowered his head and said, Actually, I am also a virgin." Modi snorted and turned his head away. Vol said in a low voice, I am most afraid of discussing this kind of lewd topic." Ming Ming blushed. She secretly looked at Chi Yu. Irai Ryue's eyes were full of astonishment and confusion. What Chi Yu wanted to do most now was to find a hole to hide in. He didn't expect that the second thing Zagru said would be this. His face blushed. "Grandmaster, what does this mean?" Zagru sternly said, "Chi Yu, I am not joking with you. You have reached the realm of 3 clouds, and Kiran's blood has been completely aroused. In this case, your body is already very different from ordinary human beings. Once you have sex, it will inevitably bring a great burden to the woman, and even put her life in danger. For women definitely can't handle it." Chi Yu's expression changed from gloominess to shock, then to joy. Suddenly, he burst into laughter. Don't tell me I'm the legendary golden spear cannot fall?" Zagru's facial muscles twitched, and he reluctantly said, "If you want to understand it that way, there is nothing wrong with it. However, it is not only a problem of your function. At the same time, because you have Kiran's breath, it is very easy for women to have orgasm, or even have orgasm disorder. At the same time, because of Kiran's nature, it is impossible for him to stop once he has done it. If there are not a few more women, it is very easy for him to be in danger. That is why I will remind you not to harm your beloved." Chi Yu let out a long sigh, and his eyes were full of smiles. "You really have a good character, and everything is good." Other than Vol and Zagru, after hearing his words, almost everyone without exception bent over and vomited. Chi Yu chuckled, and just as he was about to speak, he heard Yan Xiaoi say, "Boss, don't tell me you are really still a virgin. Didn't you say anything about that bus last time?" Hearing his words, Chi Yu was shocked. He naturally understood that Yan Xiaoi was talking about his former girlfriend. At that time, the way he and Yan Xiaoi got to know each other through the brick-breaking martial art also came from that woman. However, now that Ming Ming was present, and suddenly hearing Xiaoi mention her, Chi Yu's expression couldn't help but change slightly, and he said fiercely, "If you don't say anything, no one will think you are mute." Yan Xiaoi immediately understood, and hurriedly said, "Boss, I didn't say anything." Ever since he saw Chi Yu's valiant strength that day, he called him boss especially sincerely. Ming Ming asked curiously, "What is a bus?" Chiyu coughed twice and hurriedly said to Zagru, "Great Master, hurry up and tell me the third matter. If it is very stimulating to me, give me a hint first, lest you scare me." This Gulu smiled faintly and said, "The third matter is actually nothing much. I have already reached the age of entering the secular world to cultivate. Generations of eminent monks have passed down the scriptures, and we, who cultivate the mind, also need to take a walk in the secular world and experience everything in the secular world. Entering the secular world to cultivate is a necessary course. Only after entering the secular world, and then coming out, can we understand the true meaning of Buddhism. Therefore, I want to stay in the capital for a year and live with you. I want you to bring me to see the vast world and see the real world." Hearing Zagru's words, everyone was stunned. All the Zodiac guardian god warriors looked at each other in fear. None of them had expected that the last thing would be like this. Su Dong asked tentatively, "Master, do you really want to see the mortal world? Aren't you afraid of being polluted by it?" Zagru smiled. He said, "If that's the case, it only means that my Buddhist cultivation is not deep enough. Only in the tumultuous mortal world can I truly find the flaw in my Buddhist Dharma. Buddha sits in my heart, I hope you can help me." Sudong nodded and said, "All right then. Grandmaster, I think I can help you." Zagru put his palms together. "Amitabha, thank you very much. Tiger." Chiyu lit a cigarette for himself. He said, "Great Master, you're going to walk around in the mortal world. Don't you want us to bring you to roll around in the mortal world as much as possible?" As he said that, his eyes already revealed an evil light. Yen Xiaoi immediately understood Chiyu's meaning and chimed in, "I believe that Great Master Zagru definitely intends to do so. After all, only in the most red world of mortals can one better understand the helplessness of the secular world." "Great Master, isn't that so?" Gulu nodded subconsciously and said, "That's basically what I mean. Sorry for the trouble. I plan to stay here for about 2 years. I think 2 years should be enough for me to experience everything in the mortal world. Second, the capital city is the political and cultural center of the entire Yanhuang Republic. It should be enough for me to experience everything." Chiyu, Sudong, Yen Xiaoi, the 3 lecherous men looked at each other. They all revealed evil smiles. Hai Ryue settled Zagru in the villa. The villa was very big, and there were many guest rooms. Since Zagru was here, she naturally told him everything that happened these days in detail, including the changes in Chiyu's body, and the process of the 4 families of the Guardian of the East submitting to him. After listening to Hai Ryue's words, Zagru immediately praised Chiyu, especially his action of using blood to save Ming Ming. After settling Zagru, Hai Ryue just walked out of the room and met Chiyu head-on. She acted as if she did not see Chiyu's existence, and walked down calmly. "Ryue!" Chiyu called out to her. Hai Ryue stopped and said without turning her head, "What's the matter? I can't call you if there's nothing." "Ryue, have you been avoiding me on purpose these days? Since I woke up, we haven't spoken more than 10 sentences. I didn't provoke you, did I?" Chiyu scratched his head. He did have an inexplicable feeling. Ever since he woke up, Hai Ryue had been indifferent to him. She was no longer as cold as before, but she still ignored him as if he was a stranger. Hai Ryue said indifferently, "You're so capable now, do you still need me to care? Weren't you very brave one day? You single-handedly swept away the 4 families' confidence. You should be the leader of our Zodiac Guardian." Chiyu suddenly said, "So that's why you're angry? I didn't hide anything. If you don't ask, do you want me to say it myself? Moreover, the strength I displayed that day was mostly because my strength had increased by leaps and bounds after reaching the 3rd cloud. That was why I had such an effect. You also know that with every cloud, there will be a great improvement in strength. Plus, with Kiran's origin mutation, I was able to perform better. I'm just a ruffian, how can I lead the Zodiac Guardian? I'll have to rely on you. Ryue, don't be angry, okay? I'll tell you everything in the future, even what color underwear I wear every day. That's good enough, right? Hai Ryua turned her head and said, Is it that rare? Chiyu smiled and said, Well, Miss Ryua, don't be angry. We Zodiac Guardian are a family, it's a good thing for me to become stronger. Hai Ryua said, You're playing dumb with me. In the battle that day, you not only showed your strength, but also your rich experience. Where did you get all that experience? I don't even know your background. Chiyu shrugged and said, Do you think I've been doing nothing in the Taklamakan for a month? If you have the chance, go there and you'll understand how I got all that experience. Hai Ryua snorted and said, Anyway, be careful. If I find out that you're hiding something in the future. Chiyu was a little dissatisfied and said, How can you tell my mother? I've never had a father to raise me and a mother to take care of me. Now I have you. Seeing Hai Ryua's expression change, he quickly swallowed the rest of his words. Chiyu, Ming Ming doesn't seem to know what the bus is. But I've investigated you in detail before. Do you want me to tell Ming Ming about the bus that you and Xiao Yi used? Hearing this, Chiyu's expression immediately darkened. Stop, I was wrong, okay? Sister Ryua, please let me go. My Ming Ming and I just started. Your Ming Ming, you must have cut off the left side of your face and stuck it on the right side. What do you mean? One side is thick-skinned, and the other side is shameless. Looking at Hai Ryua's back as she left, Chiyu was really speechless. He realized that he couldn't understand this Tyrannosaurus Rex's character. However, his gloominess disappeared very quickly, because Su Dong had just told him that tonight, he would bring himself, Xiao Yi, and Master Zagru to experience the secular world.